Chapter 172. The two of them watched as Ray Palmer dodged the two javelins and smashed the enemy's head with his flail. Professor Stein, don't worry. Look to the side. I need Ray to help me open up the situation. Only then can we use this troop. Firestorm followed her finger and saw some green figures. These are the banshees of Lake Avalon. They can help these people regain their sanity. Sia had been prepared for the fat old man to come looking for her, so she had already arranged an ambush. As for regaining their sanity, it was pure nonsense. Their original personality had been forcibly erased by divine power. Even Horus would not be able to recover, let alone a mage like her. Thea did not intend to recover. She directly used the Banshee's skill to charm them and brainwash them into having a free and democratic ideology. The fat old man was the top authority in science and technology, but his understanding of magic was based on stories he heard before he was 8 years old. Now that he heard Thea's words, he was relieved. While the two of them were talking, there were already many former citizens who had been brainwashed by Sia to come over. Thea did not have time to write a detailed memory for them. She only left a message that the other side was a slave system, the other side was a democracy, and the other side was stupid and rich. Immediately, many people who had brought their own spears and bows switched sides to Sia's side. The situation gradually became clear. Ray was charging in front to disrupt the enemy's formation, and the weak banshees were desperately tempting and brainwashing at the back. On the other side, the obsidian eagle-headed man was evenly matched with the various elemental creatures. One side was almost immune to magic, and the other side was outnumbered. It was difficult to determine the winner in a short time. Horus looked at the battlefield with detached eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Human, you underestimate the power of the gods. His eagle eye instantly looked at the great pyramid behind him. A ripple with a strange luster hit the top of the pyramid. With a loud bang, the pyramid, which did not belong to a human building, collapsed instantly. Ha! Thea naturally saw this scene. What was the meaning of this? Did they destroy their own building in the middle of a fight? This way of fighting is very mysterious. Are they trying to numb me? Soon she knew that she was overthinking. The Atom Man, who was charging at the front and shouting loudly, came to Thea's side in a yellow light. Of course, this did not mean that he had become a fast runner. This was the effect of the light return spell on him, which meant that he had been fatally injured. What did you encounter? She could see the tall pyramid from too far away, but now she could only see a layer of black things on the ground. Ray Palmer was a little panicked and gasped. It's beetles, a large swarm of beetles. The biggest one is as big as a calf. Sia looked over suspiciously. Wasn't this guy the eagle god? Was he not in the underworld god? How did he summon the underworld god's subordinates? The eagle-headed Anubis could explain, but beetles were not related to his divine title at all. But now there was no time to think about it. The enemy had come. The previous knights were almost completely wiped out. Many of the ones who had been brainwashed by Thea were also drowned by the sea of beetles. Thea could only organize the remaining knights to resist and remove the brainwashed citizens. She was now the representative of justice, so these superficial things had to be done well. Thea continued to cast spells. She could not afford to lose face like this. She was in full condition. She could not lose to a boss with only a little bit of health left. Since the enemy had begun to destroy her own building, she was not going to hold back. Ha! Thea's whole body emitted an extremely hot light. This was the energy in her body that supported the operation of the magic power. She could not care less at this time. She did not hesitate to sprinkle all the hot sunlight on the tall trees in the periphery of the fantasy village. The trees immediately began to grow wildly under her light. The giant trees, which were originally hundreds of meters tall, began to grow rapidly from their roots and branches. Some trees gradually broke free from the shackles of the earth and shakily pulled out their roots. Although slow, their steps were extremely steady as they walked out of the jungle. Fight! Thea ordered the Ents. At the same time, she urgently summoned a group of knights to resist the attack of the sea of beetles. When the Ents took over the eagle-headed Anubis, she let the elemental fairies deal with the beetles. With her continuous mobilization, the situation barely returned to balance. Thea panted heavily. She had consumed so much magic that her forehead was full of sweat. She looked at Horus in the distance. Why can't I see this guy's consumption? He's overdrawing his divine power. Don't worry. Arthur's words did not make Thea feel relieved. Regardless of whether he was overdrawing or not, they could not hold on any longer. If the other party used 1 point of divine power, Sia would have to use 100 points of magic power to resist. She had been building infrastructure and pushing the troops for such a long time. Her magic power, which she thought was endless, was about to run out. The situation in the field could not be said to be good or bad. Although the giant Ents were powerful, the eagle-headed Anubis were not to be trifled with. The two sides fought until the ground shook and the mountains shook. The elemental fairies were still a little tired in the face of the endless sea of beetles. They could only use continuous self-destruction to buy time. The Atom Man returned to the spaceship to seek comfort from the Eagle Girl. It seemed that the narrow escape from death had frightened him. Firestorm had been desperately firing at the beetles in the air, but for the sea of beetles that covered the ground, his damage was almost non-existent. Last hit, if it doesn't succeed, I'll run. Thea felt that she had done her best for the free world of 2166. If she could not win, there was nothing she could do. At worst, she could come back after she had mastered her magic power. After unsummoning all the knights in the field, she finally got some magic power back. After thinking about it, she directly replaced Avalon and all the banshees with a summoning circle, summoning a stronger creature on the original basis. As for what species it would be, Thea had no idea. The balance of the battle was gradually on Thea's side. Avalon slowly disappeared, the strength of all the Ents was greatly reduced, and the elemental fairies also seemed a little weaker because she had drawn a lot of magic power. Seeing the crisis, the Atom Man once again put on his armor. This time, he did not play the night game, but flew into the air and fired at the ground. The Wave Rider was also firing at full power to buy time for her. The firestorm had already triggered a large-scale explosion, eliminating a layer of the sea of insects on the ground. However, the effect was minimal, and it did not stop the beetles for long. Miss Thea, hurry up. Although I don't know what you're doing, we can't hold on any longer. The Atom Man, who was usually joking, was rarely serious. Just a minute. Thea was also puzzled. What was she summoning with so much magic power? Fantasy Town was already a huge drain on magic power, but it was still so difficult to summon it. Chapter 173. With the continuous input of her massive amount of magic power, Avalon, which was originally in a semi-illusory state, slowly withdrew from the main dimension. First it was the lake outside, then the dense forest inside. After these areas disappeared, they were replaced by 4 thick lower limbs standing on the original floating island. What was this? Looking at the sharp claws and scales, it should be some kind of beast? Thea did not know what she would summon. These spells were like this, they were too random. The summoned creatures obtained through energy exchange did not completely follow the principle of equivalence. Some were stronger than the original creature, and some were far inferior. In Merlin's bloodline memory, there was a great wizard who had summoned a wild plant from the depths of the universe during a life-and-death battle in outer space. He had expended a lot of effort to summon it. At first, he was quite happy because this thing's energy reaction could easily slay gods and demons. However, he died after a while because although this plant was powerful, it could not move. This shortcoming directly killed the great wizard. Thea was somewhat confident. The main dimension had a great attraction to all creatures, so the chances of summoning a strong fighter were very high. The glory of Avalon finally disappeared from this world. Thea did not have time to sigh and focused on her summoned creature. Human little girl? Are you summoning me? The voice came from 100 meters high in the sky. What appeared in front of Thea was a giant dragon with 5 heads. The 5 heads were red, blue, green, black, and silver-white respectively. The scales on the giant dragon's body were changing colors at any time, and there were lights of different attributes flashing on its body at every moment. Yes, your highness. May the light of your wisdom always shine on this long night, and may the order of the night break the peace before dawn. She was so polite, but it was not because she suddenly became polite. Thea's heart collapsed a little at this time. This was a great god, one of the lords of a small world in the distant universe. The Dark Dragon Queen Taxis. This dragon was also known as the 10,000 Color Void Dragon. Of course, with Thea's power, even if she used the fantasy village, she still wouldn't be able to summon a main god. Not even a main god from a small world. Perhaps it was because of the fantasy village's illusory nature and Thea's power of time that her summoning transcended the river of time and space, summoning a younger version of the 10,000-color void dragon that had yet to become a main god. Fortunately, it was the Queen of Darkness who had yet to become a god. If a main god had descended, it would have been a huge problem. The gods of this world had all been taken away by the twilight of the gods. It was now the era of mortals. Moreover, in the year 2166, the few mortals who could fight had all died of old age. A main god's power would have no problem sweeping through this place. Thea had originally thought that it was a dragon when she saw the 4 limbs and wings. She even had the idea of becoming a dragon knight, but she instantly dismissed that idea when she realized that it was this big sister. What a joke. Right her? A fireball mixed with energy would instantly kill her. Fortunately, the dragon queen that was summoned was a younger version. Her strength was only at the level of a demigod, and she wasn't as temperamental. She was at an age where communication was still acceptable. Another god, huh? No, not yet. Horus, who was not far away, naturally saw the changes here. At first, he was really shocked. He had never seen the Dragon Queen before, but that power was not fake. After observing for a while, he was sure that the other party was only a projection. Her real body had not really entered this world, and she was in the state of a child. But he could no longer retreat. When he rushed out of the hibernation with all his strength, he had no intention of going back. Feeling the waves of pressure from the Dragon Queen, he also wanted to prove his authority as a true god. Thea's magic could be returned, so could his divine power. Beetles were constantly disappearing into thin air, turning into threads of divine power and converging back into his body. Don't even think about it. Thea immediately activated her backup plan. All the elemental spirits flashed with different colors and rushed into the sea of beetles to explode collectively. Red, yellow, and blue magic overflowed, blowing up more than half of the originally boundless sea of beetles. Horus's divine power was blocked, and he was a little angry. He looked at Thea angrily and said, "This is not in accordance with the principle of fairness." What he meant was that she had summoned and unsummoned them just now. Did he disturb her? Where is your bottom line? Thea also felt that she was bullying this very chivalrous god. She did not usually think so, but this time when compared to him, her bottom line was indeed a little low. Your Majesty Horus, you are a god and I am a mortal. This is very fair. Although she was a little guilty, she still had to say something. But her tone was already much more polite. Horus, who had a good demeanor, nodded and said, "You are right. I have wronged you." Faced with such an honest god, even with Thea's thick skin, she could only make a facepalm expression. She was really embarrassed to talk nonsense. Let's see who is the real deal. My queen, the one over there is the enemy. Although he could not be ridden, he could still give basic orders. Otherwise, this would not be a summoning spell, but a summoning spell. The myriad sky dragons stared at Horus and said with some disdain, "A bird god? What a joke." After saying that, she spread her wings. Her body, which was thousands of meters long, covered the sky and the sun. The 5 dragon heads spat out energy of different attributes. There were flames, ice, quicksand, and all kinds of deadly light beams. They came crashing down on Horus. Horus looked serious in the face of this fierce attack. He crazily channeled his divine power. His whole body quickly stretched and transformed into a giant eagle that was hundreds of meters long. He dodged all kinds of light beams and clawed at the Dragon Queen with his sharp claws. How dare you? Who do you think you are fighting? The Dragon Queen's 5 heads cooperated skillfully. 3 of her heads spat out fireballs, icicles, and sandstorms to resist Horus's sharp claws. The remaining 2 heads each spat out a light and dark energy. She used a very clever method to mix them together. Taking advantage of the moment when Horus swooped down, she shot at his chest. Boom! The earth-shattering explosion sent Horus flying thousands of meters. A big hole was blown in one of his iron wings. Sword-like feathers fell to the ground. Why didn't this guy drop any divine blood? Thea, who could finally do something, had been paying attention to the battle. The Dragon Queen's reputation was not exaggerated. She had the strength of a demigod, but she could suppress a true god. This was a classic example of challenging someone of a higher level. Thea could only admire her. Now that she saw Horus injured but did not see any divine blood, she was a little confused. She asked the sleeping unicorn in the space. He should be out of divine blood. He only has a little power left to maintain his transformation. This god is going to fall. Arthas's tone was a little sad. In order to come to this world, Horus cut off the connection with the god's resting place. If he died here, he would really die. Thea did not care about this problem. She summoned the owl and pointed at the place where the feathers fell. Go and pick them up. Maybe they can be used as arrows in the future. These fell from a god's body. Chapter 174. Thea ignored Arthas' look of disdain. This guy doesn't know anything. Arrows made from these things are still very powerful. After all, when we return to the original time and space, we still have to rely on our old skills to survive. The Dragon Queen Taxi's attacks became more and more rapid. The mixture of fire and ice, the mixture of light and quicksand, from the initial mixture of 2 elements to 3, and then 4. Her understanding of the mixture of magic and magic had surpassed all known mages. This killing method that Thea couldn't name repeatedly inflicted heavy damage on Horus. Every time Horus was heavily injured, the eagles around the battlefield would collectively wail. The sound was so miserable that it made people cry. One of Taxi's dragon heads looked at these birds coldly. She didn't seem to be chanting any spell, but an invisible shockwave swept across in all directions, killing all the birds within a radius of 10,000 miles. They fell from the sky like dumplings. Even the owl summoned by Thea was implicated. Just as she wanted to summon it again, Taxi's cold voice came. "Those are my spoils." The voice was indifferent, but it was not to be refused. Thea was depressed. What does this mean? Does this mean that you plan to pack up and take away the last god? This kind of evil nature is too difficult to communicate with. Thea had no choice but to endure it. This was like casting a movie. The director and producer had the final say when choosing the actors, but when the cast was selected and you couldn't suppress the lead actor, then the lead actor had the final say in the cast. Thea was now the poor director who had to choose a big name as the lead actor. Since she had no right to speak, she would just watch her performance. The Dragon Queen's future divine position was neither light nor darkness, and it was not an element. What she liked was the broad field of chaos, time, war, and so on. The one that was summoned was far from the stage of igniting the divine fire. Although the attack was fierce and Horus was forced to retreat, she really couldn't take down this existence that had been a god for countless years. With a loud bang, Horus mustered all his remaining strength and sent the mountain-like taxis flying with a single wing. He landed on the ground and transformed into his human form. Kneeling on one knee, he silently chanted an unknown language. Thea, who had a tiny bit of divinity, could understand it. This was the divine language, known as the supreme language between heaven and earth. It could communicate with countless planes, space, and time. Great Father God Osiris, please abide by the ancient agreement and give me the power to protect the order. The voice was bitter but firm. Horus, my son, according to our agreement, I will give you power. However, the eye that you have placed with me will no longer belong to you. Are you sure? The entire world was completely oblivious to this voice, but a few divinities could hear it. The fearless Dragon Queen could not help but take a step back. Thea was confused. Who was this? Osiris. One of the 9 main gods of ancient Egypt, the handsome and cool god of the underworld. The current god of death, Anubis, was his eldest son. Horus was the second son of his family. How did this guy come out? Although Taxis was also known as the main god, that was in her future, not now. In fact, even if she was, her future would not be as good as this god of the underworld. Her world was too small, and Osiris was the god of the main plane. One was the future village chief of a foreign village, and the other was a retired senior official in charge of human resources. It was clear who was stronger and who was weaker. Fortunately, the retired old cadre had no intention of coming in. After confirming Horus's will, he disappeared as if he had never been there. With his departure, the earth seemed to come alive. In the violent shaking of the earth's crust, a large amount of yellow energy gushed out from the depths of the earth and rushed into Horus's body. Many of the energies were extremely heterogeneous. This god did not reject them at all. He did not care that such absorption would destroy his foundation. Quickly attack him. He is absorbing power from the underworld. Taxis was relying on the fact that she was a woman, or a female dragon. She shouted at Thea and did not care about her face at all. She spat at Horus, who was still absorbing energy. This kind of enemy was taboo to watch when they were in the stage of gathering energy. Thea naturally did not intend to let him go. She gathered energy between her fingers again and pointed at Horus, who was surrounded by the yellow energy shield. Pa! Pa! The bright golden beams of light struck Horus's defensive barrier, causing it to flicker, as though it would shatter at the very next moment. Thea sighed. This defense was very strong and solid. It was just an illusion that it would be broken immediately. As long as it was not broken directly, it could be restored in the next second. Divine power was very pure. If it could succeed, then so be it. Unlike magic power, which required a lot of nature changes, concealment, and conversion, divine power did not have these things at all. It was simple, direct, and domineering. This was the fundamental difference between the two. Thea returned without success, but it did not mean that taxis also had no success. She could not defeat retired cadres, but it was not a problem to deal with a second-generation official who did not inherit the family business and resigned to go to sea. She had completely fused the 5 elements in her body together, and the energy was extremely unstable. Thea was frightened, for fear that it would explode in the next second. But the Dragon Queen was really magnanimous. She was not anxious and did not panic. She compressed the almost pure white magic power ball in her hand twice, until the magic power was almost in a liquid state. Only then did she stop and threw it at Horus, who was half kneeling in the distance. The two came into close contact at an extremely fast speed, and the instantaneous explosion of power raised the surrounding thousands of miles to the ground. Not to mention the pyramid that Horus had pulled up, even the infrastructure projects that Thea had done were all turned into dust. The Wave Rider was also blown thousands of miles away. Rip Hunt only had time to tell her to be careful, and then the two sides could not contact each other. Thea was also blown back hundreds of meters by the aftermath of the energy. She tried to stop herself and watched with rapt attention. The smoke dissipated, and Horus slowly stood up. At this time, he could be said to have changed a lot. His originally well-muscled body had become extremely rough, and there was a trend of deformity. His legs were disproportionately large, and his upper body seemed to have shrunk a little compared to before. His huge eagle head had also changed from white hair to red hair. His sky-blue beak seemed to be covered with a layer of thick ink. From time to time, corrosive liquid dripped from the corner of his mouth and fell to the ground, melting into a deep pit. The left eye that he had taken from Vandal had completely disappeared, leaving only a terrifying hole. The only thing that hadn't changed was perhaps his right eye. It was still so arrogant and able to see through everything, but the fatigue in his eyes couldn't be concealed. Stupid guy! In order to recover his strength, you actually gave up your godhood. Horus' transformation did not scare taxis away. The 5-headed Dragon Queen carefully looked at him for a while, and made a contemptuous comment. Yes, No, it's me. I'm no longer a god. I've given up my godhood. I'm no longer the guardian of the pharaoh. Without the pharaoh, the world doesn't need me. What else can I do? I just want to prove my ideals in the end, my justice. Horus, who was surrounded by black gas, said resolutely. Chapter 175. A god who came down from the throne. Haha. I need your power so much. Let me prove to you that you are on the wrong path. Taxis's 5 dragon heads were laughing, and it could be seen that she was really happy. She did not expect to meet a fool when responding to a random summon. Just to prove her own ideas, she did not want to be a god and took the initiative to retreat to the level of a demigod. Horus was the second son of Osiris. His elder brother Anubis had long wanted to take over his father's priesthoods, so he had no choice but to start from scratch. In his long life as a god, he also pieced together a few priesthoods, namely, Sky, Guardian, and War. Guardian was his main priesthood, and the rest were all scattered. Take War as an example. War had a special god, and what Horus had only gave him the qualifications to inherit it. There were 7 or 8 other gods with the same qualifications. The god of war died in battle, and only those who were somewhat related to War could inherit the priesthood of War. Taxisis was not interested in Sky Guardian, but she was a little envious of War. This was one of her main priesthoods in the future. She could only say that she was very lucky to be able to come into contact with it in advance as a demigod. The idea was wonderful, but the reality was that she could not defeat Horus at this time. Although both of them were demigods at this stage, she was just a projection into this world. Horus was the real Horus, and he was in a dark state with full health and mana. Although she was slightly better in combat skills, she could not compete with him now that he had more health and mana. Little girl, come and help, I'll give you a share of the spoils. Taxisis was still very generous, and she called Thea from afar. Sia was now trying her best to communicate with the unicorn. She had no choice. This cute pet did not like the evil dragon queen no matter how she looked at it. Sia was afraid that if she was distracted, the dragon queen would control her body and rush up to her for a whirlwind. At this time, when she heard the dragon queen's call for help, she quickly comforted the unicorn in her mind, fearing that the unicorn would do something that would hurt her and please her enemies. Humph. After obtaining the unicorn's silent approval, she flew to the dragon queen's side and bowed slightly. She spoke in a tone that was neither close nor distant. My queen, I will assist you. Focus your attacks on his head. He is no longer a divine body. He will be injured, he will die. After saying that, Taxi swung her tail arrogantly and went up to meet the attack. TSK. Thea pursed her lips. Of course, you don't hit people in the head. How stupid would I have to be to hit his feet? He wasn't Achilles. Although she was slightly displeased, she still followed up with an attack. Actually, it was just a ranged attack. Close combat would be slightly dangerous. Looking at Horus, who was covered in black mist and surrounded by a dark aura, it would be best to avoid touching such a thing. With Taxis as the main force, she happily took up the promising job of long-range DPS. The Dark Dragon Queen went all out at this time. Her combat talent and combat awareness were far superior to Horus, who had never fought seriously before. She used all her skills to continuously wear down the defensive barrier on his body. Sia also released a few finger of light at the right time, hitting the earthen yellow barrier with a sizzling sound. As time passed, Taxis became more and more impatient. Her summoning time was almost up. After all, Thea's summoning was still at the level of a mortal. Summoning a demigod of her level, her existence time was rapidly passing. If it wasn't for her main body desperately maintaining the channel in another world, she would have been sent back. Damn it! Taxis then spat out several mixed light beams at Horus's defensive shield. Of course, she was not worried about the world being ruled by the evil gods. She just felt that the duck in her hand was about to fly away, and she was not happy. Little girl, do you have any other moves? In desperation, with her pride, she could only try to ask this mortal for help. Although she was a very strong mortal, the light aura on Thea's body had always made her uncomfortable. In the end, she really had no choice but to ask her. Of course, Thea still had one move that she did not use. She believed in the principle of keeping a backup plan and not revealing it until the end. Using special magic to transmit her voice to the Dragon Queen, when Taxis first heard her words, her 5 dragon heads and 10 dragon eyes instantly stared at her with a vivid expression, as if she was pondering whether to eat it raw or roast it with fire. But after constantly weighing the pros and cons, she finally gritted her teeth and made a decision. She nodded and motioned to Thea. Come on. I'm going all out today. Thea couldn't wait to look up to the sky and laugh. What did this mean? A dragon knight, and a future main god. If she wanted to express her current mood, she could only use the word awesome to describe it. She chanted a spell in a low voice. She needed an enlargement spell, and at the same time, the Dragon Queen also shrank her own body size. Thea grew to 10 meters tall, and the Dragon Queen shrank to 300 meters. My queen, I'm going. Thea took advantage of the situation and even pretended to be obedient. She was very happy. The expressions of Taxi's several dragon heads were different, but they were all unhappy. Come on, Arthas. The two in their consciousness synchronized again. This time, they needed to fuse the ultimate weapon of the unicorn. The horn had a powerful anti-magic function, and it was the weapon of choice to deal with Horus, who was wearing a turtle shell at this time. The horn was usually long, half a meter, but it was too small for this kind of size. The two of them combined a part of their magic and created a 40-meter-long sword. No, it was a long spear. Thea flew onto Taxi's back and put the dragon spear between her red and white dragon heads. There was no other way. She had too many heads and it blocked her vision, so she had to bear with it for a while. The Dragon Queen was also very uncomfortable. It was like a thermometer in the armpit of a person's arm, but she had to bear with it for the sake of the divinity after the battle. The next scene was a little strange. A righteous knight with a long spear rode an evil dragon to deal with a demigod of the neutral camp. Your Majesty Horus, give up. Your eternal life should not be wasted here. The unicorn said this while controlling Thea's body. She had always felt sorry that this original true god was going to fall here. Young humans, come on, I have no regrets, I'm very tired. Even if I die today, I won't hate you. Horus's voice was full of fatigue. Although his body was protected by a protective shield, his insides were almost collapsed. It was not that easy to dethrone himself. He had sacrificed much more than Thea and the others could see. This guy can see that there are two of us? In the space of consciousness, Thea chatted with the unicorn in surprise. Nonsense, that dragon can see us too. You really have no common sense. The unicorn was still dissatisfied with working with the dragon queen, and despised her for no reason. Chapter 176. Thea didn't want to ask all kinds of questions. It would make her seem ignorant and shallow, but she really had no choice. These magicians were all elusive. The swamp monster did mention Madame of Xanadu, but where did this person live? That big guy didn't say. Madame of Xanadu was obviously an internal title. Thea couldn't go to the TV station to post a missing person notice. Her subordinates were also unreliable. She couldn't ask the owl court to send a few claws to look for her, right? The claws who received the order must have a confused expression. There was no photo, no address, not even a real name. It would be a miracle if they could find her. Little girl, hold on tight. Taxis interrupted her thoughts at the right time and began to climb higher. Thea could only hold on to one of the dragon's heads tightly. She didn't have the courage to make a saddle and put it on the dragon's back, so the current riding method was extremely primitive and crude. In fact, there was also the advantage of her female identity. If it was a man who wanted to ride the dragon queen, let him try. In 1 minute, it would be digested in 3 minutes, and it would turn into feces in 5 minutes. Hula, hula, the dragon's wings flapped violently, and soon it had stopped at the highest point. Are you ready? One of the dragon heads turned back and asked. Come on, your highness. Thea stared intently at Horus's empty eye socket. That should be the only flaw in his body. Taxis quickly turned around in the air. Her movements were vigorous and full of the beauty of power. Her wings kept flapping behind her, accelerating her speed. Thea could only hold on to the dragon's spear tightly. She didn't intend to add any buffs to the dragon queen, not to mention the dragon's natural magic immunity skin. The other party was a top master in the field of magic. She could just forget about her self-taught skills. Horus also noticed their full sprint. After absorbing too much power of the underworld, he had lost the ability to transform into an eagle. He could only stand quietly on the ground and prepare to deal with the next thunderous attack. At this time, Thea and Taxis had already turned into a bolt of lightning, and the huge kinetic energy and acceleration allowed them to pass through a white fog, accompanied by a loud sound, and with the momentum of Mount Tai, they rushed down towards Horus. 5,000 meters, 4,000 meters. As the altitude continued to decrease, Thea's heart also jumped to her throat. This was slaying a god. Although this person was a little silly and took the initiative to drop a level, it was still very worthy of praise. Since ancient times, how many people had been able to do this? Thea only hated that her friends on the Wave Rider hadn't flown back yet. It was a pity that her heroism had fallen to the point where no one could appreciate it. As the distance between them grew closer and closer, Horus's strategy was very simple. He would avoid attacking them from the front and attack from the side. Sia and the others, on the other hand, were to kill him with all their might, regardless of everything else. Both sides were competing in terms of vision, speed, and strength. Perhaps there were also some small tricks mixed in. 800 meters. 500 meters. Raise your spear. Taxis shouted sternly, and Thea also raised her spear with all her strength, concentrating all her energy on this spear, hoping to kill him in one shot. One person and one dragon had their backs to the rising sun, breaking through thousands of miles of clouds, and with the belief to challenge the true god, they slammed into the giant below. When the distance between them was less than 20 meters, the two sides could already see each other's expressions clearly. Thea was determined and full of vitality, while Horus, on the other hand, was lethargic, with reluctance and relief in his eyes. We have the upper hand in terms of momentum. Thea was overjoyed. She raised the spear in her hand and aimed at Horus' head from afar. The spear's movement seemed as fast as lightning, but in Horus' eyes, this speed was just a... If he was still in the true god state, he would directly grab the spear and decide whether to fight or kill the enemy. But now that his realm had fallen greatly, he couldn't take such a risk. He aimed at Thea's shoulder and arm, and the moment she raised her spear, he determined where the opponent's attack would land. Horus had already seen that there was something wrong with her spear. It was as white as jade with a spiral pattern, and the spear tip flashed with an inexplicable aura. He felt that even if he was still in the divine rank, he would still be injured. At this time, he was even more unwilling to take it head-on. The moment the spear tip touched the protective shield, he hurriedly dodged to the right. He dodged. Horus was overjoyed. Unbeknownst to him, Thea was also shouting in her mind, "We fell into a trap." Back when they were in the sky, they had already communicated with each other. Although Horus's power level had dropped, he still had his experience. Since they were so blatantly trying to pierce a hole in his body, Horus was no fool. He would definitely be able to guess that they had an anti-magic weapon in their hands. This required them to play a little trick. Fortunately, whether it was a person or a dragon, they were both women who were born with a talent for acting. Thea's acting skills came from her mother, Moira. Although Taxis had little experience, she had lived for a long time, so she could be considered a model of self-taught. The two cooperated very well for the first time. Thea's focus and the Dragon Queen's ruthlessness successfully deceived a former true god. The spear that they had been holding properly was actually a fake. It was simulated by the Dragon Queen with her own exquisite magic. But to be afraid of being seen through, she added a large amount of time magic from Thea's original body to the tip of the spear. Anyone who used time would know about it. Even the gods would stay away from it. Horus felt that it was not wrong to calculate that it would be a threat to him. After Horus tilted his head to avoid the fake spear, Thea immediately let go and shrunk her body to return to normal. She picked up the real 2-meter-long spear that she had been hiding behind her and suddenly jumped down from the dragon's back. With the help of the powerful inertia and speed, under Horus's horrified gaze, she gathered all the strength in her body and fiercely stabbed at his left eye socket. The sharp tip of the spear encountered some resistance at the outermost layer, but as the tip of the spear flashed with silver-white spiral ripples, the golden shield was visibly shriveled. A large amount of divine power was separated from the shield by the unicorn's horn and returned to the most primitive magic crystals, dissipating into the air. The initial resistance was great, but as the tip of the spear continued to penetrate, the sense of delay became smaller and smaller. Finally, Thea broke through the golden shield, and the tip of the spear finally arrived in front of Horus with her strength. At this time, Thea had completely abandoned her defense and held the spear with both hands. Time seemed to have lost its meaning at this moment. The 13 eyes of the 3 people, dragons, were all watching her movements. The sound was neither crisp nor loud, but Thea knew that she had done it. She had killed a demigod with divinity with her own hands. Although this achievement could not be replicated, she was proud enough to add the title of God Slayer to herself. Horus, who was stabbed by the sharp dragon spear from his left eye socket to the back of his head, screamed and fell to the ground. His body was like a mountain, crashing to the ground. Chapter 177. Countless flashing balls of light flew out of his body. Divinity! Taxis was waiting for this moment. Her 5 heads, 2 front claws and tail began to plunder frantically. What elegance, calmness, and delicate movements had all disappeared. The Dragon Queen was like an auntie at a discount stall, grabbing this in her hand. The azure divinity is not bad. Take it. That, the dark black divinity of the underworld, slightly worse, but it is also fated with me. Retired old cadres dare to come to our village to find me? I will kill him. Others may be afraid, but I am not afraid. I will take it. After her frantic plundering, she took away nearly 50% of the scattered divinity, most of which could be directly absorbed by her. The remaining 30% dissipated into the air, and only 10% was absorbed by Thea. Or rather, it was absorbed by the unicorn in her body. Why is this thing ignoring me? What kind of personality does Thea have? How can she not take the benefits that are right in front of her? Regardless of whether it is suitable or not, she will take it first. But no matter how hard she tried to grab it, the balls of light flew away around her without stopping, not even bothering with her. This made her extremely unhappy. Isn't this discrimination? Is there anyone who is reasonable? When a few balls of light automatically entered her body, she was very happy, and countless thoughts emerged in an instant, such as igniting the divine fire, taking charge of the divine position, and walking to the position of the supreme god. But she was not happy for more than 2 seconds. Seeing the balls of light circling around the unicorn, she knew that she was thinking too much. The unicorn turned a blind eye to her frustration, and happily absorbed the essence of the balls of light. Looking at the Dragon Queen and the unicorn in her body that was in a cultivation state, Thea curled her lips. Both of you are ignoring me. I am going to open the corpse. Do you think that I wear red every day is fake? I will let you see my lucky hands. But after walking around Horus' body, she found that she was a little helpless. This guy was too poor, his upper body was naked, and there was only a linen cloth covering his lower body. It did not look like he had any equipment. What? Take away the linen cloth? Thea felt that she did not have such a heavy taste. Furthermore, Horus's transformation was quite serious. His entire body was somewhat deformed. Sighing, I'll take my share first. Casting a magician's hand, an invisible giant hand grabbed at Horus' right eye, but it didn't move at all. It didn't move at all. She felt a little awkward. She had wanted to act gentler and less impatient, but this fellow's body was really sturdy. Thea could only do it herself. She walked to the side of the corpse. No matter what, Horus was a good opponent. Sia mourned for him for a second. She still had to take what she needed to take. She had spent a long time casting spells but still couldn't take out the eye. Sia rolled up her sleeves and prepared to use force. These eyeballs are really big. Horus was 10 meters tall, and his head was more than 1 meter tall. Including his long beak, it was more than 3 meters long. She pulled out Thea's anti-magic spear from her left eye socket. Her right eye was still shining, but it was getting darker and darker. Just the part of the right eye was the size of a square table. How was she going to take such a big eye back? The Adaman's nanotechnology must be ineffective on it. Thea thought about how she looked like carrying a huge travel bag and felt stupid. But anyway, she had to get it first. She had made a lot of mental preparations in advance, but she did not expect that as soon as her palm touched Horus' right eye, she felt that the delicate balance was broken. Horus' right eye seemed to have been turned into sand, and it turned into fine sand that flowed down from Sia's fingers. What the hell? Sia immediately turned back to look at Taxis, wondering if she was the one who did this. If you don't want me to take it, just say so. The Dragon Queen was stunned by her angry eyes. Can't you see that I'm busy? Looking carefully at the scene, she suddenly realized. His eye chose you. You're lucky, but you can take your share of the spoils. After that, without waiting for her reply, her long dragon tail rolled Horus' body under her and she sat on it. The meaning was clear. The rest was mine. Thea was a little speechless when she saw her anxious look. She lowered her head and pondered. The Dragon Queen's words were simple and clear. Horus' eye chose her? Did this mean that it was her eye? She touched her eye socket. It was still her eye, but her field of vision had become extremely wide. Other abnormalities could not be seen for the time being. There were no bloody things like gouging out or changing eyes. Considering that the Dragon Queen was such a big village official, she would not lie to a small shrimp like her. She probably was not lying when she said that her eye was on her. However, Thea originally intended to put it together with Horus' orb to see if it could form a set. Now that it had become her eye, she immediately gave up the original idea. Even if it could form a super artifact, she would not gouge out her eye. Perhaps it was because the Dragon Queen had fought side by side with her before, but the unapproachable aura around her had dissipated quite a bit. The 5 dragon heads scanned the battlefield from 360 degrees. Whenever they found the fragments that Horus had dropped during the previous battle, they would immediately fly over to pick them up and keep them in a small pocket. This should be a space bag, right? Thea looked at it enviously. This technology had long been lost in the main world. She really wanted one, but she knew that she did not have any bargaining chips now. She could only watch the Dragon Queen loot the battlefield. After a full 10 minutes, Taxis finally scanned the entire battlefield from all angles. Unless there was a protagonist with extraordinary luck, there would not be anything left in this battlefield. She wrapped Horus' body on the ground with a piece of purple cloth, licked her lips, and waved at Thea excitedly. I've remembered your space-time coordinates. Call me next time. Carrying the big bag, she drew a light curtain on the ground and the entire dragon flew in happily. So urgent. Thea could not help but complain. Will this dragon eat Horus when she returns? In her mind, the cartoon version of the 5-headed dragon sat upright with a scarf around its neck, knife and fork in its hand, and a braised eagle on the table in front of it. As for calling you next time, Thea chuckled. Who would dare to call you when the battlefield was so clean? Fortunately, she was basically a bystander in the later stage. She only contributed the last blow and got the best eye and the 4 drops of God's blood. When she pulled out the gun just now, the tip of the gun also had 2 drops, making a total of 6 drops. This was God's blood. Whether it was for personal use or as a gift, it was high-end and classy. Thea asked the unicorn. The blood was also useful to her, but it was not suitable for her to absorb too much. 3 drops were enough. Thea considered taking the remaining 3 drops back for old Ma. Maybe he could also successfully awaken his bloodline? Thinking about Malcolm, who knew magic, seemed to be quite interesting. As for Moira, she would have to see the effect of the god's blood. If the human body became 30 years younger after absorbing it, she would not dare to give it to her mother directly. The eyes of the people in the United States were poisonous. There were so many evil scientists. If Moira, a public figure, had an earth-shattering change, she would be sliced up in minutes. Chapter 178. Malcolm, on the other hand, did not have such concerns. First of all, he lived in seclusion. Even if there were any abnormalities, with his intelligence and superb skills, there would not be many mad scientists who could slice him up. The 2 closest relatives were easy to deal with, but who should she give the remaining drop of blood to? Thinking of Tommy and Oliver, Thea was a little hesitant. She could only take 1 step at a time. Taking off her helmet, Thea heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, she had retreated from the deep integration. Suppressing the unicorn all the time was not a comfortable thing. This guy was too stubborn and stubborn. Indeed, being herself was the most comfortable. The Wave Rider finally flew back half an hour after the battle ended. They got off the ship and were a little dumbfounded by the wasteland in front of them. It was said that this place was from a big city in 2166, right? Now, forget about big cities. Even poor villages were more prosperous than this. Fortunately, some of the citizens who had been brainwashed by Thea came back intermittently. It was believed that they would rebuild their homes on this wasteland. Right? The Wave Rider was a spaceship, not a rescue ship. It could only leave some necessities for them to survive for a few days. The rest would have to wait for the government to rescue them. Thea now deeply understood why Superman was not popular. Too much destruction was a sin. The battlefield had been reduced to a barren land. Deep pits could be seen everywhere. It was fine if Thea's light element was the light element, but if you encountered the fireball and acid pit that Taxi spat out, you could only admit that you were unlucky. Just think of the scene, falling down with a splash and vaporizing a living person in an instant. What kind of F*King thing was that? Captain, where are you going next? Thea followed them onto the ship and turned to ask Rip Hunt. His 1,000-year-old enemy was finally caught, and his wife and son were not in danger of dying. It could be said that his initial mission of assembling the legendary squad had been successfully completed. Rip Hunt had probably thought of this question as well. He answered with certainty, "I'm going to send Vandal back to the prison of the Master of Time. That's where a tyrant like him should stay." Thea heard this and secretly curled her lips. "I'm afraid you want to go back to being an official? It's a pity that your dream can only remain a dream." The Council of the Masters of Time had already reached an agreement with Vandal. If you send him back, he will be released in minutes and you will be locked up. In the end, Rip Hunter and his companions blew up the Time Masters base, sweeping this so-called time management organization into the trash heap of history. Of course, Thea would not stop this. In fact, she was even prepared to help. Just thinking about it made her excited. Even the Master of Time had been blasted into the sky. Wasn't she the only one left who could be considered a proper worker? As long as these people didn't die, she would have to be careful of these people coming out to kill her whenever she did something that was different from history. She would carry out the so-called revision of the timeline and completely erase all traces of their existence in their base camp. This was a good thing that would be very profitable. As for whether Vandal ran or not, she did not care. So what if he ran? What bad things could an 80-year-old old man do? Even if he were to live another 10 years, he might not have the courage to do so. "Captain, Ray's injury has worsened. Come and take a look." "Oh, Miss Thea, come and take a look too." As soon as they boarded the ship, they were stopped by Kendra, who hurried over. She pulled Rip Hunter into the ship. After taking 2 steps, she saw Thea turn around and pull her back. Thea stared at Kendra with cold eyes. Her gaze was a little scary, completely shocking the silly hawk girl. She stopped her hand halfway, not knowing what to do. Thea, of course, was not giving her a hard time. She just found it strange. "Your god is dead. How can you still be alive and kicking? How can a proper priestess like you be fine? This doesn't conform to theology. Look at those eagles. They fell from the sky like dumplings. I don't dare to say anything about other animals, but in this world of 2166, eagle should be considered a protected animal from today onwards. There was no other way. They had basically all committed suicide. Do you know who the enemy we just fought was? Thea asked seriously. Kendra, the hawk girl, was an honest person. She didn't hesitate at all and shook her head. Sigh. Sia covered her face. Great God, Horus. No wonder you lost an eye back then. Your eyesight is as bad as the South Pole. Of the two priestesses you chose, one was ambitious and the other was timid. Let's not talk about the ambitious one. It's understandable that the timid one didn't hear your call. Now that you, the god, have died, she didn't even realize it. This only shows that her faith was extremely undevout. After being reincarnated 206 times, there was nothing left of her. Can you still extend your wings? Thea asked the last question. This question was a bit abrupt. Under normal circumstances, it was taboo to ask others about their abilities. However, the hawk girl and Thea were not normal people. The hawk girl carefully felt it and smiled embarrassedly. It's not always effective. I can't use it now. Thea looked at her carefully and said word by word, Horus has fallen. Who is this? Go back and look it up in the dictionary. What I want to say is that after he fell, the 4,000-year battle between you and Vandal has ended. Your superpowers have disappeared, and you can live a normal life again. You mean that Vandal's immortality has disappeared as well? Rip Hunter, who had been a listener all this time, didn't care much about the hawk girl's experience. However, he cared a lot about his old rival. That's right. Although I don't know what they encountered to cause this cycle of reincarnation, one of the powers that caused the reincarnation has disappeared. Now that they're dead, there's no doubt about it. Ha! Rip Hunt was just about to laugh out loud, but when he thought about the hawk girl beside him, he forced himself to hold back. After all, she had already lost her supernatural ability and immortality, and he was laughing beside her. Did he still want to be her friend? To be honest, the hawk girl was a bit depressed. She wasn't worried that Thea would lie to her, but she felt that fate was too strange. Half a year ago, she was still washing dishes. Then, she was told that she could be a superhero and that she had to fight her 4,000-year-old rival. Now that half a year had passed, she finally accepted this fact in her heart. Then, she was told that the enemy was dead and she had nothing to do with it. She should go home and live a good life. If she was willing to do the job of washing dishes, she could still hire her. This kind of exhalation was indeed a test of a person's mental endurance. Fortunately, she was a timid person by nature. She didn't have much ambition, so she didn't care if she didn't have superpowers. Thea could somewhat guess the change in her state of mind. To be honest, being able to let go of things was also a good trait. This was also because the Hawkman was dead. This time, he was completely dead. If he was still alive and heard Thea's words, vomiting 5 liters of blood would be considered light, and he might even be paralyzed. Chapter 179. Let's go see Ray first. His injury suddenly worsened, and Gideon couldn't do anything about it. The Eagle Girl. There was no more Eagle Girl. She would be called Kendra from now on. She collected her thoughts and did not dare to hold Thea's hand this time. She led them to the medical room. It doesn't make sense, Thea thought as she walked. She had treated more than half of Ray Palmer's injury at that time, and the rest was suppressed. It shouldn't have rebounded so quickly. When she saw the atomic hero with doubts, she was indeed shocked. His handsome and sunny face was shrouded in a black mist, and even though he was fixed in the medical chair, his body was shaking violently from time to time. What the hell? Thea understood at a glance. When Ray Palmer was hit by the Eye of Horus, he, who was still a god at that time, could not help but have a trace of divine power in his eyes. This trace of divine power was so weak that it could be blown away by a gust of wind. Even if Ray was an ordinary person, without magic treatment, he could recover in a year and a half. But the bad thing was that this trace of divine power formed a very small connection channel. When Horus borrowed divine power from his retired father, the power of the underworld connected to Ray Palmer through this channel. Fortunately, Thea had treated him once before and left a lot of light energy in his body. This light energy and the power of the underworld offset each other, and with the help of Gideon's future technology, he barely survived until now. But at most half an hour left, he would be completely dead. Of course, Her little power was far from enough to compete with the underworld. If taxis could be regarded as a village chief, then Miss Thea could not even be regarded as a village committee member. She wanted to wrestle with a retired old cadre? She was dreaming. Fortunately, she had a winning magic weapon in her hand. According to her calculations, as long as a drop of divine blood connected with the original trace of Horus' divine power in his body, Ray Palmer would be fully recovered. Because of the blessing, he would even have some mysterious talents. But it was definitely not her style to give it away for free. Although she had a good relationship with Ray, it was far from the point of giving him treasures. Even if they wanted to discuss the reward, how could they discuss it when he was unconscious? However, she couldn't just watch him die. It wasn't easy to be a hero of justice. Thea pondered for a while, and a simple plan emerged in her mind. He shouted anxiously, "Gideon, I need you to scan his body with your primary authority. His condition is not optimistic." The artificial intelligence hesitated for a few seconds and reported a number and symbol password. Just like how Thea was afraid of her terrifying calculations, she also did not understand Thea's magical abilities. 2 people, 1 human and 1 machine? Thea had never asked for permission, so she pretended not to know and didn't give it to her. Now that Thea suddenly spoke, of course, it wasn't because she had full confidence in dealing with this artificial intelligence. She had obtained this authority and returned to her original space-time. If she remembered correctly, Gideon's primary body had already been built by Reverse Lightning in Star City's cutting-edge technology laboratory. She couldn't deal with the emotional version of herself in front of her, but wasn't it easy to deal with the almost newborn version of herself? In fact, it was best to catch Reverse Lightning and brainwash him. This person was a real transmigrator, a visitor from the 25th century. In his original space-time, he was a scientist. After transmigrating to the space-time, he lost his speed and could only focus on cultivating the Flash in order to return home. Shouldn't it be easy for Sia to deal with a scientist without superpowers? But these transmigrators made her very afraid. Their ability to travel through time at will was too terrifying. As long as Sia put her plan into action, it might only be a second for her, but for those who traveled through the river of time, this was history that had indeed happened to them. Time was a line for them, and there was no distinction between the past and the future. They could travel through it at will. As long as something happened, they could plan carefully, bring their equipment, and jump to the day before the point of time to stop and counterattack. What the F***ck was this? She didn't want to directly confront the transmigrators, so she had higher requirements for Thea. But fortunately, she didn't plan to directly move Gideon in her space-time. As long as she had permission, she could get a lot of source code. She could give it to Felicity and let her slowly write it. Now that she had obtained initial permission, she of course had to pretend. She took out all kinds of scanning equipment and scanned Ray Palmer 10 times. Whether it was useful or not, at least she looked like an old expert. The Atom Man originally had half an hour to live, but she wasted another 10 minutes. After the scan, he couldn't be treated immediately. Thea began to show off her acting skills again. She lowered her head and looked up. She walked in circles around his hospital bed and sent a golden light into his body from time to time. After observing his reaction, she shook her head and sighed. Her behavior scared Kendra. She was just an ordinary person now. Even if she was saved, it was hard to say if the Atom Man would still like her. She was now waiting for Sia's diagnosis report anxiously. During this time, the other people on the spaceship also came to the infirmary. The Atom Man was really popular. Even the villainous duo showed some concern for him. Sia looked around from the corner of her eyes. Since everyone was here, it was about time for us to start. It was convenient and fast to drink directly from the bottle. It took 3 seconds, and the person could run and jump in 10 seconds. But if it was obtained easily, it didn't show how precious it was. The reason why Buddha wanted Tang Sanzang to go all the way to get the scriptures was also because of the process. Thea naturally wouldn't be so unwise to make the scene bigger. If the Atom Man woke up in front of everyone, he would owe her a big favor. Although she didn't use the technology of the Atom suit, she could use it as a reference. She pointed a finger at his forehead and used her own light magic to suppress the dark power of the underworld. "Untie him, quick!" Thea ordered several onlookers anxiously. They hurriedly untied the Atom Man, who was tied up like a dead pig, and laid him flat on the ground according to Thea's instructions. Then, under Rip Hunt's gloomy expression, she began to draw formations. Seeing her drawing formations all over such a high-tech ship, The old captain almost indulged her. I can't stop you, so just draw whatever you want. The effect of the magic circle this time must be real. Thea didn't want to leave any loopholes. Gideon's database was as vast as the sea, and his computing speed couldn't be measured by quantitative units. It was really hard to say whether she could solve the mystery of magic by relying on technological means. Thea prepared a regeneration spell. The name sounded like a common spell, but it was actually very effective. Even if the body was cut in half, as long as the person didn't die at that time, the body could slowly recover. At the same time, this magic circle could also be used by Captain Lang next time. Of course, the premise was that he could afford it. His freeze gun claimed to be able to freeze the flash, and the temperature was close to absolute zero. This was very good and very valuable for research. Chapter 180. Under Rip Hunter's resentful eyes, Thea put Ray Palmer in the middle of the magic circle and began a new round of casting. The familiar action and the familiar bright light once again lit up the spaceship full of technological feeling. Although it looked bright, it was actually not very useful. The dark magic was constantly destroying the body, and Thea's resurrection was desperately repairing it. In the end, the victim would be the unlucky one. Of course, Ray had already fainted, which was good news for him. After wasting another 5 minutes, Thea wiped the sweat from her forehead. Maintaining the output of magic was also a technical job. Her magic was still increasing, but her control was still poor. She was afraid that she would use too much power and kill the Atom Man. After all, he was a very funny guy, and it would be a pity if he died. Finally, it was the last step. Divine blood. With a pained expression, Sia took out a metal box from her backpack. It was tightly wrapped with 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. It was airtight. Of course, she would not take it all out. Americans also knew that the rarer something was, the more valuable it was. She took out a dark blue bottle with a drop of golden blood in it. This was one of the first few drops. The blood that came out of the eye socket in the last shocking blow was much darker than this drop. She planned to keep it for her own use. This drop had less energy, which was just right for the Atom Man. Holding the bottle up to the window, Thea pretended to be melancholy. From time to time, she shook her head, nodded, gritted her teeth and frowned. She thought to herself that there should be a supporting actor in this group. She should not let herself maintain this expression for too long. Kendra still had a lot of feelings for the Atom Man. Watching Thea's performance, she thought that she was in a big trouble. She asked, "Miss Thea, what's that in your hand?" "Alas, I've exhausted all my means. Maybe I can only try with this." Thea's expression was full of helplessness and reluctance, but there was also a trace of determination. "What's this?" Because of the fusion, the chubby old man was very sensitive to high-energy reactions. He had already noticed that the thing in Thea's hand had amazing energy. God's blood. Thea didn't explain further, because there was no need to. It was better to let their imaginations run wild. Hiss. Several of them let out an unintelligible sound at the same time. When they arrived at the scene, the Dragon Queen had already taken away all the spoils of war. Not even a strand of hair was left behind. In their minds, it was Thea's cosmic explosion that drove the god away. After that, the god went back to wherever he came from. They never thought that he could leave behind something as high-end as blood. "We should take it." The first thing that came to Fat Old Man's mind was to take it for testing, mixing it with water, diluting it, and making a few tons of it. In the future, the entire human race would drink a bag of it every morning and night. By then, it would not be a dream for humans to go to Mars and rush out of the solar system. At the same time, he had already thought of how to persuade Thea to contribute. Something like dedication, freedom and democracy, and sacrificing one's family for the greater good. But at the thought that this drop of blood could save Ray Palmer's life, he instantly hesitated. Should he save him first or keep it for analysis to help all of humanity? This made the fat old man, who had always lacked decisiveness, break out in cold sweat. Several heroes on the side of justice had the same thought as him. They could not help but think about what they would do if they encountered such a situation. Thea looked at their expressions out of the corner of her eye. It was about time. If she waited any longer, Atom Hero would be dead. Gathering a small amount of magic on her little finger, she gently made a cut on his artery and stuck the blood on the wound. The drop of blood seemed to be attracted by something, and entered his body along the artery. For people on the side of magic, This kind of blood absorption required a lot of preparatory work before it could be fully effective. But now there was not enough time. Atom Hero was a proper representative of science and technology. He would not believe you if you told him about the 4 elements. Fortunately, there was a trace of the divine power of the Eye of Horus in his body, which could guide the absorption. As for drinking it directly, it was even more nonsense. It was not a drink. The absorption capacity of the human stomach was far from enough to absorb such a large amount of energy. Entering the blood circulation was the best choice of all the bad choices. When this drop of divine blood entered the body, the reaction was extremely fast. Atom Hero, who was an ordinary person, was directly given such a powerful tonic as divine blood. Even if he trained to the level of Oliver, it would be useless. His consciousness was instantly defeated. The energy of the divine blood began to wash over him unscrupulously. Fortunately, he still had the dark magic of the underworld in his body. The divine blood automatically found these dark energies, and the 2 sides began to fight fiercely in his body. Thea at this time was doing her best to open the magic circle outside, repair his damaged body, bones, and protect his brain with her own magic. The whole process lasted for an hour, and the 2 energies finally ended with the divine blood winning. The black gas was constantly squeezed out of his body and dissipated in the air. Ray Palmer's fluctuating body finally calmed down, and Gideon also timely reported his physical indicators. Except for some weakness, his actual physical fitness had been greatly improved. Let him rest. He should be able to wake up at this time tomorrow. Thea glanced at Atom Hero. He was 2 centimeters taller than before, and his skin looked smoother. Some of the bruises and scars he had suffered in the past few years as a superhero would also be healed. It was impossible to completely remove the marrow, but a slow transformation was possible. Thea then left the infirmary. She was exhausted after the day. She wanted to find a place to bask in the sun. Even if she would be beaten back to her original form when she went back, it was really comfortable to bask in the sun. That kind of pleasure on the cellular level could not be replaced by anything else. The rest of them all looked at the dead Atom Man with envy and jealousy. This guy was indeed lucky. That was divine blood. Maybe Atom Hero would awaken his superpower in a few days, and beat Superman and Batman. They sighed and left one after another. When Captain Lang left, he glanced at Atom Hero lying there and silently made a decision in his heart. Sia didn't care about their strange looks anymore. She found a reclining chair on the spaceship and slept outside for a day and a night. She enjoyed the sunlight during the day and the moonlight during the night. Nothing was delayed. The people on the Wave Rider did not understand what kind of training method she was using, so they could only keep a limited amount of attention. Thea was not the kind of person who slept all day. Occasionally, she would enter the blood space to communicate with the unicorn. To be honest, her light spells were terrible, and her foundation was a mess. The unicorn was also a creature of the warrior class, and her understanding of magic was also in a state of half-baked. If it were not for taxis as the main force, it would be a miracle that the 2 of them together could kill a god. She did not know how Old Ma and the Court of Owls were doing. As long as there was a basic spell book, Thea's strength would take a new leap. Chapter 181. While closing her eyes to rest, she was also summarizing her gains this time. Her combat experience and power level were too high, and she really didn't feel that it would be of much help to the future. She could only say that she had seen some things from a vantage point. As for how deep her understanding was, it was really overestimating her. After all, she herself was rapidly improving, and her foundation was not stable. Those profound energy applications were still far away from her. The acquisition of the divine blood was a small gain. Through the personal experiment of the Atom Man, she realized that this thing really couldn't be absorbed casually. Not to mention giving it to Malcolm and Moira, she needed to consider carefully if she wanted to absorb it herself. The Atom Man was really a lucky general. Although his luck was not the best, he was still somewhat of a cockroach. The transformation process of the divine blood was far more violent than Thea expected. Fortunately, the dark magic of the underworld and the divine blood had a violent confrontation, which to a certain extent mitigated the violent outbreak of the divine blood. In the end, it was calm. Although the power of the divine blood was weakened by 70 to 80%, the Atom Man's life was saved, and his body was strengthened a lot. This was the result of the combination of his cockroach life and good luck. Thea could replicate this process, but the energy consumption was too great. It was a bit of a waste of God's gift. Everything needed to be planned in the long run. The last remaining gain was the Eye of Horus. This eye was different from a certain manga where it could be used after being removed. It was not a physical addition, but more like an enhancement of the original organ function. Thea once covered one eye and looked into the distance, and the result was gratifying. This Eye of God was indeed amazing. Thea's eyes were strengthened, and she avoided the tragic future of Kakashi, who had to wear an eye mask and pretend to be half-disabled. Originally, she could see objects within 100 meters, but now, she flew into the air and looked carefully until the blood vessels on her forehead burst, but she still couldn't see the limit of her vision. The effect of looking at the starry sky at night was even more amazing. The magic in her body was running wildly, and she was so scared that she quickly closed her eyes because she could already clearly see the craters on the surface of the moon. She believed that she could see them further away, but the consumption of magic was too great. The main purpose of Horus's eyes was to distinguish right from wrong, good from evil, but Thea's eyes did not have these functions at all. Instead, they gave her the ability to identify magic lines. In the past, she used to draw magic circles by feeling, but now it was very clear and easy to see. As for whether there were any deeper functions, she felt that there was definitely one, but she had yet to discover it. Why would different individuals have different abilities? The only explanation was that the divine power was adjusted according to the individual's will. Now that he was able to see all the hidden lines of mana, the ability to see through everything could be considered a bonus. Damn, Thea was very happy to receive this ability. But while she was happy, she kept feeling that she was unknowingly on the path of Superman-Supergirl. Previously, it was already shocking that she could absorb sunlight. Now, she even had X-ray vision. If Batman knew about this, her reputation would drop again, and she wouldn't be able to explain it. As a top scientific figure, Batman would have to believe you even if you tried to explain to him about slaying gods and demons. Thea already felt that the day when she would leave Batman and automatically join Superman's camp was getting closer and closer. Fortunately, she was a woman, so no matter how unhappy he was, he would not overreact. It was just that it was inevitable that she would get into his little black book. But when she thought about how Batman even wrote down the method to deal with her, she knew how serious his condition was. Thea shook the magic ball of Horus in her hand. The originally glittering magic ball now seemed to be covered with a layer of shadow. She had fused with the divine eye, and the power of both sides came from the same source. She could see very clearly that the magic on the magic ball was fading every minute and second. Needless to say, it must be related to the fall of Horus. The main character was dead, and the divine power on the Eagle Girl and Vandal was quickly dissipating. This equipment that had been passed down for countless years was about to die. It would be a pity to just wait for it to break. Thea referred to the information that Gideon had translated for her and the brief information in the Eye of Horus. She was ready to absorb the fire magic in the ruby at the top of the magic ball, but unfortunately, her body was now full of light magic, and she could not accommodate any other power for the time being. Thea could only use a simple method to temporarily seal the magic ball until she returned to the original time and space to officially absorb it. As for the scepter of Horus, she did not need to ask anyone. She could feel that the scepter was indeed not in this time. In fact, even if it was, she did not need it. The scepter also had the problem of dissipating divine power. Other than selling it for a few coins, it was useless. The night passed uneventfully. The next morning, Sia joined them for breakfast. This was the advantage of their high-tech spaceship. Everything depended on imagination. As long as one could think of something that had existed in human civilization before, Gideon could synthesize it. Thea had enough of the American breakfast, which was inherited from the British style of dark cuisine, so she automatically made a Chinese meal. There was millet porridge, a tray of soup dumplings, and delicious salted vegetables. She bit into the steaming filling of the dumplings, which overflowed with the fragrance of the meat. It was a refreshing taste. As a killer who had been all over the world, Sarah Lance, who could barely speak a few words of Chinese, immediately threw away her breakfast and replaced it with a breakfast of the same standard. She went to the side and ate happily. The remaining few people had different expressions. Some were too embarrassed to change, and some were too naive to suit their tastes. Thea did not say much to them. After breakfast, she wiped her hands and prepared to continue to sunbathe. "Thea, thank you." When she walked to the door, she saw Ray Palmer holding Kendra's hand and standing outside the door. Ray bowed to thank her. Thea certainly could not grab him by the collar and yell at him to give her the benefits. She was calm and collected. How's your recovery? Any new abilities? Ray shook his head. I don't feel like I have any special abilities, but my strength, speed and stamina are now ridiculously strong. It was obvious that he was very satisfied. He smiled brightly, showing his 8 teeth. No new abilities awakened? Thea took him to the test room to see how his physical fitness was now. The other members of the legendary squad also heard the noise and followed to see what was going on. Everyone was very satisfied with the results of the test. Ray Palmer was the most satisfied. He was originally tall and handsome, but in fact, he was an empty shell. Years of scientific research had hollowed out his body. Not to mention Xianxia, who was considered a grandmaster of combat. Even an ordinary person was stronger than him in terms of pure strength. Now, although more than half of the energy of the god's blood had been consumed halfway, it had still reborn his body. Combining several data, his physical fitness had exceeded the limit of human beings. In a horizontal comparison, his body was similar to that of the American team next door. They were the kind of people who could get up after a few seconds after being shot. That was to say, he had left the original timeline. Otherwise, he would have automatically joined Superman's team, whether he liked it or not. Chapter 182. Looking at the test report, the Atom Man, who had written dozens of papers, naturally understood what had happened to him. Although he was not a medical major, the test report was easy to understand. Just by looking at a few important indicators, he understood how important this matter was to him. The frivolous look on his face disappeared, and he asked with uncertainty, "May I ask, what were you planning to do with that drop of blood?" Thea knew that the Atom Man had taken the bait, so she immediately put on her act and said with a bit of melancholy and a bit of relief, "The original plan was to give it to my mother. Since my father and brother disappeared, she has been in poor health. But seeing your reaction yesterday, fortunately, I didn't give it to her. You're lucky, don't worry about it." Then she turned around and left, pretending to be relaxed and gave him a smile. But her half-true and half-false words made Yuan Man very sad. It would have been fine if she had kept it for herself, but she had left it for her mother. As the CEO of the Palmer Group, who would acquire Quinn's company in the future, he was very clear about the Quinn family's mess. As for being a guinea pig, he had no complaints. Seeing that he was about to die, it didn't make much of a difference whether he was a guinea pig or not. After all, Sia had given him a chance to be a guinea pig. After weighing the pros and cons in his heart, the Atom Man finally made up his mind. He quickly caught up with Thea, took out a USB flash drive from his pocket and handed it to her. "These are some schematics of my armor design. I'll give them to you as compensation." After saying that, the handsome man ran away without looking back. Sia looked at his back with a solemn expression, but in fact, she was overjoyed in her heart. An artificial intelligence and an atom suit, these were arguably the two most valuable pieces of equipment on this ship. Even Inverse Lightning, who came from the 25th century, was full of praise for the atom suit. Although his words were somewhat flattering, it was still a great invention. Thea put it in her bag. When she returned to Star City, she could start the preliminary preparations for the Iron Man suit. After all, the original space-time was different from 2166. There were many heroes and villains who could fight. He could not be as high-profile as he was at this time. He was not going to join the Dark Justice League. He still needed a superhero identity that could be seen in the light. The Iron Man could fight and fly. His image was good, and he would not arouse the hostility of the citizens. He was the most suitable choice. Before she could think further, another human-shaped gift bag came to her. Captain Lang Han is a straightforward person. He doesn't need Thea's performance. He hands her a USB flash disk and says that this is the blueprint of his freeze gun. He doesn't have the blueprint, but this is the blueprint of the real thing. Thea was not surprised. The original design was designed by Cisco Ramon to prevent the flash from going berserk. However, before the gun could be fired, it was stolen by Captain Frosty. After that, he used the gun to torture the Flash for 3 years. However, Captain Lang Han, who only had a high school education, was actually able to take the real thing and draw the original picture. He even added his own changes. It was a strange thing. It had to be said that this world's technological equipment was weird. For example, the black guy in Firestorm could repair a spaceship after half a year of repairing cars. If that was the case, Captain Lang Han's high school education was not too low. Thea was not uninterested in his freeze gun, But she was not that interested either. She had studied Mr. Freeze's freeze gun in Gotham, so the two should have some similarities. However, she had to put in some effort to get the item. She dragged Captain Lang, Heatwave, and Sarah Lance, who volunteered to follow her to the magic circle yesterday. She told him to go in. In order to show that it was worth the money, Thea put in her best performance for another 20 minutes. Sizing up Captain Frigid, who was about to be cooked, Jianghu felt that the effect was not bad. He deliberately used the Eye of Horus to scan his genetic chain. His genes did not undergo a huge mutation, but there were some new appendages on the normal genetic chain. These should be the special genes that provided his abilities. How is it? You should be able to feel it yourself. Captain Lung Han was different from Firestorm. He was created by the combination of two people. Usually, the two of them did not have any superpowers, so there was no reference value. The person in front of her could be considered the first superpower user that Thea met. She could not help but ask a few more questions out of curiosity. Captain Lang Han pondered and said, "There seems to be a change, but I don't know the details." After saying that, he stretched out his left hand and made a gesture of releasing an icicle. Unfortunately, nothing happened. He could not help but feel a little embarrassed. Thea crossed her arms and thought for a while. Maybe it's because the genes have just fused. You need to rest more and eat more to replenish your energy. After saying that, she looked at Sarah. For the next 2 days, don't do that kind of exercise to avoid unnecessary trouble. Bear with it for a week. After saying that, she did not look at their ugly faces and went to bask in the sun. The Wave Rider stopped for a week in the year 2166. Rip Hunt had arranged for his wife and son, fully expecting that the Time Council would send someone to find him. But in the end, everything was calm and there was no movement at all. This made him a little puzzled. In the past, the people of the council were like hunting dogs, chasing him until they never stopped for more than 3 days at the same time. What happened recently? Since he could not figure it out, he might as well take the initiative to attack. The few people on the Wave Rider happily boarded the ship. They thought that this was their last trip, but in fact, there were many stories to be told. If there was anyone who was the happiest recently, it would be the old Captain Rip Hunt, who got his revenge. His wife and son were safe, and he was ready to return to his official position. The second happiest person after him was Dr. Ray Palmer. The sunny and cheerful Atom Man was now radiant with a second spring. His physical fitness had greatly improved, and after a short time with Knight Gawain, his dream of becoming a knight was ignited again. His first step was magical modification, abruptly changing the original high-tech atomic suit into a medieval armor. This made the fat old man, who was also a top authority in science and technology, lament. He did not know if it was for the purpose of experiencing life, but he wandered around wearing that armor every day. Anyone who saw him would not think that this person was a doctor from the 21st century. He also coaxed Gideon to get a piece of alloy steel from the spaceship and made a very flashy-looking two-handed sword. One day, Thea reminded him that his face was too smooth, and Captain Lang assisted by the side, saying that he looked like a eunuch in armor. The former Atom Man, now the Atom Knight, began to grow his beard again. In just a week, he had already begun to show results. Here it had to be said that his mentality had changed the most. The armor could only bring protection, but it was the heart that was strong. That short period of cooperation with Knight Gawain allowed him to finally break through the defenses in his heart. He was able to bravely face himself. There was no need to shrink or escape. Giving Thea the information on the Atom suit was perhaps a way for him to say goodbye to yesterday. As for the title of Atom Knight, it was a self-mockery, and everyone tacitly agreed to it. Chapter 183. After setting the coordinates, the Wave Rider carried the excited group back to the Time Master Council's main base outside of the timeline, a place they called the Vanishing Point. Rip Hunt was full of anticipation as he dragged Vandal to meet his former employer, the Time Master Council. Before he left, he injected Vandal with some sort of medicine that would make him look younger. After all, Vandal now looked like an 80-year-old man. Capturing such an old man wasn't anything to brag about. Making him look younger would also show off his achievements as Captain Rip. Thea was secretly amused. It was hard to estimate how many misjudgments Rip's smart aleck actions would cause. The Time Master Council hid outside of the timeline and gave out orders every day. From the name, it seemed to be a high-class organization, but in fact, this organization was just bragging when they claimed to be the Time Master. There were quite a few people in the organization, And there were several hundred people with the title Time Master in front of their names. Rip used to have this title as well. They usually didn't leave the front lines and just sat in a circular hall with a staircase. There were several hundred people sitting on the 3 floors inside and outside, and they usually had nothing to do but brag. There were several time ships under the Time Master Council. This was the elite level. Thea couldn't remember the exact number, but she felt that there were no more than 10 of them, and the Wave Rider used to be one of them. Below them were the miscellaneous soldiers. There were a dozen or so soldiers with laser guns. These soldiers, other than guarding the door, were also responsible for serving tea and water to the several hundred old masters so that they wouldn't starve to death. This was their scientific way of governing, a complete inverted pyramid structure. 90% of the people in the organization were just there to get by. Thea knew that soon, the Time Master Council who was in cahoots with Vandal would release him and arrest Rip Hunt. Then the dozen or so soldiers would attack the Wave Rider and arrest the rest of the team. If she wanted them to blow up the Time Master Council, this would have to happen. But since Miss Thea was on the ship right now, she could destroy the dozen or so soldiers with a single breath, and the subsequent events wouldn't be able to develop. Might as well hide. Thea greeted the people on the boat and said that she was going out for a walk. In this godforsaken place called the Vanishing Point, time was in a state of absolute stagnation. Thea could not absorb any sunlight or moonlight. Fortunately, the power of the Time Walker in her body could absorb the power of time here. Although it was weak and Thea did not know what to do with it, it would be a waste not to take advantage of it. She walked out of the spaceship slowly. Now that her magic power had reached an extremely high level, she didn't need to cast any spells. Her body automatically became invisible, and she walked into this strange base under everyone's gaze. The color is so bad. It's better to blow up this place. After circling the place twice, she had already strolled around the place. The color of the place was extremely boring. It was either white or gray. However, it was her nature to like brighter colors. No matter how she looked at it, it was not pleasing to the eye. Thea searched around for a long time but still couldn't find the computer that claimed to be able to calculate the past and future. This computer had a very magical name called the Eye of Arcane Nuclei, but it was actually a product of science and technology. Just as she was wondering if she should find a leader to brainwash and ask about the computer, suddenly, a few people walked over from afar. Rip Hunt? Who was that repulsive old man walking in front of him? Who cares who he is? From the looks of it, he was a typical villain showing off. Not only would he not kill the protagonist, he would also show off his pride, then wait for the hero to counterattack. It seemed that the plot had begun. Thea followed with large strides. These people were all ordinary people, so she didn't have to worry about being discovered. This was the unscientific aspect of magic. After following these people around for a while, they finally stopped in front of a large door. The repulsive old man gestured to the 2 guards and led Rip Hunt inside. What is this place? Rip looked around and found that he'd never been to this room before, so he couldn't help but ask. The Hall of Supremacy, the hall where we observe the Eye of Arcane Nuclei. A window to observe the past, present, and future, the old man spoke with a confident expression. Hearing this, Thea almost laughed out loud. A bunch of normal people talking about the past, present, and future without shame. This was a topic that even a god wouldn't talk about. Who do you think you are? The old man called D. Ruth blabbered on until Rip Hunt's face turned ashen. Satisfied, he had the guards escort him back to his cell, preparing to pull him out to show off the next time he was in a bad mood. Just as he was grinning sinisterly, Thea withdrew from her invisible state. Under his shocked gaze, she used a single hint technique and he lost consciousness. It took her 3 days to deal with the 2 leaders of the Owl Court, but now she was able to instantly control this level 1 guy with 0 magic resistance. This was a world of difference. Thea couldn't help but sigh in amazement. What an intoxicating power. But before she could even sigh, Thea was afraid that Rip's companions would become much stronger and rush out to save him. So she quickly began to read the old man's memories. Thea discovered some unexpected information. In the old man's memories, the Eye of Arcane Nuclei wasn't built by them, but rather was given to them by some unknown entity. They had searched for countless years, but still couldn't find the time of this exchange. Thea's heart was pounding. This seemed like the work of a god, not to mention a god who had the ability to travel through time, a main god. This made her instantly give up on the idea of taking him away. Fortunately, she didn't need to be the vanguard. There were people like Rip Hunt who were fated to take the thunder, She had something more important to do. And that was to join them. She was someone with a certificate. As long as she was registered, once this Vanish Point base was blown up, she would be completely free in the timeline. As one of the highest leaders of the council, it was very easy for Ruth to do this. Controlling the back-end computer, he easily completed Thea's so-called joining application. In theory, she would be able to arrest the group of people she saw in the future, but of course she had to be able to catch them first. Increase my access to the Wave Rider's central computer, Gideon, to the highest level. This was her real goal. The Vanish Point central computer was able to control the AI of the ship. Although Gideon had personal feelings, she couldn't remove this basic rule. This wasn't a problem. If Thea needed access to the entire stronghold, she would have to hold a meeting to discuss it. But now it was just a small ship central computer, so Ruth could do it himself. Master, it's done, the old man said flatteringly. Chapter 184. Thea tried to enter the system and observed for a bit. Sure enough, she was already ranked third in terms of authority. The only ones above her were the Council and Rip Hunt's authority. In fact, Gideon most likely had a hidden highest authority, but she didn't need to completely control her. As long as she had the authority, it was enough to control the mindless AI in her own timeline. She quickly entered Gideon's historical records and began to search. 2100, 2050, 2008. Here it is. She finally found her initial login password in 2005. This should be the original password set by Reverse Lightning. As long as she had this, she would be halfway to obtaining the AI that she needed the most. Very good, Thea praised. Bring me your laser gun. Thea had always regretted that the Time Wanderer had destroyed her skateboard and blown her gun to smithereens. Now she had to get back at him. The laser gun was quickly obtained. The bad old man always carried one with him. Thea waved her hand. You're no longer of any use. Tell this lackey to do whatever he wants. She looked at the gun again and again. The firing mechanism was no different from a traditional gun, but the energy block was something she had never seen before. It was blue, had no radiation, and didn't show any absorption reaction. It shouldn't be in the category of natural light. She put it in her bag and prepared to study it when she had time. As for the Eye of Arcane Nuclei, it was actually a computer that used supernovas as its energy source. She had only observed it from a distance and had no clue. The knowledge contained in it was far beyond her comprehension. The Time Council had obtained it for countless years but still couldn't understand it. She didn't have the confidence to understand it with just a few glances. She would go back to her hometown and build it herself, so it was safest to have Rip Hunt blow it up. Time passed quickly. Suddenly, Thea felt that the psychic power she released was missing. Did that mean the bad old man was killed? She cast invisibility on herself again, sensed her surroundings, and ran in the direction of the gunshots. Hurry, we have to hurry to the Eye of Arcane Nuclei. Rip Hunt's expression was currently extremely ugly. He didn't think that all of this had been planned by the board of directors. Now, he only wanted revenge and wanted to blow this damned place up into the sky. The legendary team also followed. Among them, the Atom Man and Captain Frosty were particularly conspicuous. Both of them had been strengthened by Thea. One was equivalent to a weakened version of Iron Man's team, and the other was somewhat similar to Bobby the Iceman. Under their powerful offensive and fierce bombardment, they rushed into the underground engine room of the Eye of Arcane Core. The strengthening effect is not bad. Thea followed silently. She was originally afraid that the legendary party would change the storyline after being strengthened by her. Now, it turned out that they were back to their old ways. It will take me a few minutes to figure out how this thing makes him self-destruct, Atom Man observed and said confidently. Hurry up, we'll buy you some time. Rip took a few people to block the door. Outside the door, soldiers with laser weapons had already rushed in. Thea saw this scene and found it hard to imagine. This thing looked like it had all kinds of sensors and all kinds of wire signal sources. This design was countless years ahead of the development of our technology. You can really figure it out in a few minutes? There should be a limit to your genius, right? But what made her speechless was that Atom Man really found the key point after fiddling with it for a long time. You guys hold on a little longer. I have found the polarity matrix. As long as it is reversed, this place will explode in 2 minutes. How powerful is the explosion? Heat Wave from the giant head asked. Atom Man pondered for a few seconds. On a scale of 1 to 10, It is 10 to the 100th power. Thea saw this scene and wanted to laugh. Heatwave was still trying to figure out what 10 to the 100th power was. Although the legendary team tried their best to stop them, the army of the council, which was actually a dozen guards, still came in with laser weapons. Only then did Thea realize that these soldiers were surprisingly strong, on the same level as the Time Walker she dealt with before. This was interesting. The leaders at the top were all weak, but the soldiers at the bottom were all invulnerable. It was a miracle that no one rebelled in this way. Adam Man exclaimed, which attracted the attention of several people at the same time. What happened? Rip asked as he fired at the soldiers. There seems to be an anti-tampering device here. I have to press it, or it will explode immediately. Ray Palmer sounded a little frustrated, but he still tried to press the switch. You guys go. As the heroes of justice, how could the remaining few people allow him to sacrifice himself in front of them? This scene was even more lively than the original plot. The fat old man withdrew from the Firestorm clone. I am the oldest. You guys are still young. Let me do this job. Let me do it. Let me do it. In the original movie, Captain Lang was willing to sacrifice himself to save everyone for Heatwave. However, with so many heroes at the scene, it was not his turn to be the villain who robbed the ATM. Therefore, he and Heatwave could only watch obediently. Rip Hunter, the neutral guy who pretended to be a righteous person, also shouted a few times, but he did not intend to sacrifice himself. He had saved his wife and son, and you want him to die? You might as well load the file and start over. Sigh, too bad there were too many people here, and the plot changed. Sarah was supposed to give Captain Lang a kiss before he died, but now he could not see it. Thea deactivated her invisibility spell and walked out of the dark. Hi. Hello everyone. Miss Thea? Several people greeted her in a mess. Remember, legends never give up. Thea's expression was very serious, but she was actually very happy. These words sounded very powerful coming from her mouth. She walked to Adam Man. I'll do it. There was a burst of exclamations. No. Miss Thea, let me do it. Sia pursed her lips. You guys are just shouting there. You didn't even move your feet. Besides, you guys didn't even let me finish my sentence before shouting blindly. Let me take a look. Ignoring everyone's jaws that had dropped to the ground, she started to look at it. It was actually a very simple device. There was a detonation switch that had to be pressed at all times. As long as there was no pressure on the switch, it would go up and trigger an explosion when it reached a certain point. As long as there is pressure? Thea turned to ask Atom Man, who was sweating but exuding a sense of mission. Yes. Atom Man still had some expectations for her. Although such a sacrifice would be noble and fulfilling, it would be best if she didn't have to die. Thea instantly cast Magician's Hand. When I say 3, 2, 1, let go. 3, 2, 1. The two cooperated well. As soon as Atom Man let go, she pressed on with Magician's Hand. Thea looked carefully for a few seconds and found that there was no problem. She did not talk nonsense with them and told them to hurry up and leave. When they got on the spaceship, everyone was relieved. Thea received another wave of gratitude. When the spaceship flew far away, she got a signal from Rip and deactivated the spell. She had just seen a dark blue explosion from the council base on the display screen when she felt an unknown but incomparably powerful pulling force fiercely dragging her. It happened so suddenly that she had no time to defend herself. In a flash, she was pulled into an unknown space by the huge force. Chapter 185. Wow! Thea only felt that she was being pulled by this great force and instantly broke through the speed of sound, the speed of light, and a lot of other speed units that she could think of. She was surrounded by a light blue halo, and she could only see fragments of countless figures. There were old people, children, burned villages, and tens of thousands of people cheering when rockets were launched into the sky. But when she wanted to take a closer look, there was no time to distinguish. The great force was pulling her too fast. She only felt as if countless years had passed. Just when she finally regained some control of her body, she only felt that the great force suddenly exerted force and threw her out of the void. When she broke through a thin layer of sticky substance, Thea finally saw something familiar. White clouds were floating in the air, changing various shapes from time to time. Thea glanced at them and didn't care anymore, because she found that she was in mid-air and was falling at an exaggerated speed. Originally, even if she was thrown from the moon, with her magic power, she wouldn't be hurt because she could fly. But now, she found that the environment she was in seemed to be covered by a legendary anti-magic domain. She couldn't use any of her magic power, and the fusion state had automatically ended. The original red Kevlar returned to her body. Although the situation was critical, fortunately, her mind was still flexible. She began to search for her skateboard in the rapid fall. It was indeed convenient to carry the nano version, but it was difficult to find when she really needed it. It was too small. She couldn't find it for a while. She searched her trouser pocket, mobile phone, credit card, and a lot of other things. When she saw land, Thea found a skateboard the size of a cigarette box. She pressed the switch on the side, and it instantly grew bigger. She laid her whole body on it and hurriedly turned on the skateboard suspension function. Finally, she stopped more than 7,000 meters above the ground. Phew! Thea let out a long breath. She was no longer the naive girl she used to be. She vaguely understood that most likely, the explosion of the arcane core's eye opened a time tunnel, and maybe there was more than one. She was pulled into the time tunnel by the psychic force of the Hand of Magic, and arrived at this seemingly desolate island in front of her. That's not right. Who has nothing better to do than to set up a large-scale anti-magic domain on a deserted island? This person's condition was too serious. Looking around, all he could see was blue seawater. Using the full power of the Eye of Horus, he could not see any signs of land other than the island beneath his feet. After inspecting his body, he discovered that both the Yang mark and the Yin mark had been completely sealed, and he couldn't sense his originally shocking magic power. Should I leave or go down first? As Thea was pondering, she noticed that many people had gathered on the island below. A group of people was pointing at her. Thea focused her eyes and looked over. When she saw the appearance of this group of people, her heart skipped a beat. There were more than 100 people standing in the open space below, all of them wearing metal half-body armor, leather skirts that only reached their knees, and short boots that were less than 30 centimeters long. Their arms and thighs were exposed, and they all stared at Thea, who was floating in the sky with a dignified expression. Many of them were even holding spears and bows in their hands. Thea was not afraid of these people who were holding bows and arrows. Although her magic power had disappeared, her technological equipment was still there, and the Eye of Horus was also operating normally. She would not be afraid even if there were twice as many people, let alone 100 or 80 people. Even if she couldn't beat them, she could still kite them. But what made her collapse was that these 100 or so people had bulging chests, and they were all women. Looking at them with sharp eyes, they were all women who were very good at fighting. On the outside of the crowd, there was one woman who stood out the most. Thea was too high to distinguish her exact height, but this woman was obviously taller than the people around her. Her temperament was also very different. Like a sharp sword, she faced everything proudly. As if she felt Thea's gaze, she even waved at her. What the hell, she can see me from so far away. Considering that this tall woman was obviously not of Kryptonian descent, and the surrounding environment and the women who looked very valiant, the name of this anti-magic island was obvious. Paradise Island. The blessed land of the gods. The hometown of Wonder Woman Diana. This tall woman who can see me from 10,000 meters up in the sky can't be Diana, right? Thea decided to go down and ask about the situation. Now that she was considered a traveler, the first thing she needed to do was to ask about the era and location. She could roughly guess the location, but she couldn't guess the era. Superman might be able to calculate the era of the Earth by looking at the lifespan of the sun, but she didn't have that ability. Driving the brand new skateboard, Thea slowly descended to a height of 1 meter from the ground. Facing the female warriors who were on high alert, she took off her hood, revealing her beautiful face. She raised her hands to show that she meant no harm. In fact, she didn't let her guard down, and the skateboard under her feet could be raised at any time. Where are you from? Are you a foreigner? The one who spoke was a middle-aged woman. Her clothes were more luxurious than the people around her. She wore an ancient Greek-style golden eagle helmet on her head and a brown cloak behind her. At first, Thea didn't understand the first 2 sentences. She then changed 3 languages until she switched to English. Thea finally understood and confirmed her guess. Otherwise, which old woman on a deserted island could speak 4 or 5 different languages? Thea was experienced in dealing with this kind of middle-aged woman. Although her actual lifespan was very long, she was always very talkative and eager to be valued. For Thea, who had been fooling Moira for many years, it was easy to deal with her as long as she knew what she was thinking. She bowed slightly, looking neither humble nor polite. Your Majesty, I'm from the United States. The old woman was very pleased with her respect, but she still had some doubts in her tone. Why do I feel like you fell from the sky? Ha! They saw me fall from the sky? This was a big loophole. Fortunately, Thea didn't panic in the face of danger. She pretended to be silly, acted cute, and said with a confused and uncertain tone, I don't know how I came here. I was fighting criminals in my city when I suddenly fainted. When I woke up, I was already falling. Her words were ambiguous. These women were indeed isolated from the world, but as the queen, the old woman could receive all kinds of information. She was obviously not a normal person. Besides, the skateboard was too eye-catching. She couldn't hide the fact that she came from the future for long. She deliberately obscured the era she was in and shamelessly labeled herself as a defender of the city to boost her reputation. Sure enough, these people believed her words. Moreover, she was a woman. The estrangement between them suddenly disappeared. Well, welcome to Paradise Island. I'm Hippolyte. What's your name? Thea. Thea Quinn. Chapter 186. The Queen didn't want to introduce the others. Miss Quinn, let's go to our residence and have a rest first. We have little contact with the outside world. After that, she smiled gently. This old woman was very similar to Thea's mother in some aspects. On one hand, she loved her daughter, and on the other hand, she was full of lies. She said that all the gods were dead, and when Diana believed it, she said that it was all in the story. She said that the sword was the ultimate weapon, and that it could kill the gods and destroy the world with one strike. In the end, it was pure nonsense. If it weren't for Diana's sudden outburst, she would have been fooled by her. Thea didn't want to expose her, so she nodded and said, Thank you for your help, Your Majesty. Please call me Thea. Hey, this little girl is really good at talking. Hippolyte was tortured by the naughty child Diana every day for 5,000 years. Now that she saw the good-looking, gentle and polite Thea, she immediately had a good impression of this girl. When she walked to the horse, she realized a problem. They all rode here. Does this outsider know how to ride a horse? She also knew that the outside world had entered the mechanical age. She turned around and asked, Miss Thea, do you know how to ride a horse? This question stunned her. She had already jumped off the skateboard to clear the misunderstanding. In order to avoid shocking the world, she didn't use the nano device. Instead, she held it in her hand and followed them on foot. When she heard Hippolyte's question, she was also stunned. She carefully thought about it. Many years ago, when old Robert took her and Oliver on vacation, she learned how to ride a horse. But after so many years, she didn't dare to say that she knew how to ride a horse. Thinking in her heart, she didn't stop walking. Now her physical fitness was far better than the little girl back then, so it was no problem for her to learn now. But when she walked to a brown horse designated by Hippolyte, she grabbed the reins and jumped on the horse neatly. The horse sent her a very friendly signal. She didn't even need to use the reins to control the direction. With just a thought, she could accelerate and decelerate the horse. This is? Thinking about it again and again. Maybe it's because unicorns are their ancestors? Was that why he was so friendly to him? The moment Arthas entered the island, the airspace was sealed. She could not contact Arthas as well. After thinking for a while, she decided that there was no harm in doing so anyway. Thus, she followed the female warriors of Paradise Island into their residential area. Out of the corner of her eye, she glanced at the tall girl who seemed to be Wonder Woman. Their eyes met in the air. Perhaps it was because Thea's eyes were a little aggressive. The young Diana quickly retracted her gaze and looked straight ahead with a serious expression. Thea is a little amused. While casually responding to Hippolyte's seemingly concerned but actually probing questions, she lowers her head to communicate with the horse. The communication was extremely smooth. Thea finally confirmed that this was Paradise Island. Not only the horse she was riding, but the horses of more than 100 people around her were all female. There was not even a single male horse. When she asked them how they reproduce, the signals transmitted by the horses were very vague. It seemed that they did not know how to express themselves. They had the consciousness of reproduction in their nature, but there were indeed no male horses on this island. They seemed to have entered a cycle of birth, growth, death, and birth again. As for where they were born, they did not know. They were just born naturally. Thea was a little speechless. Ninja Master, Did you see that? You are not even as good as a horse. What are they? They were repeatedly reborn, just like the eagle girl who was just sent back to wash the dishes. The eagle girl reincarnated 206 times in 400 years, and the horse's life was short, probably 500 times. How free are these gods? These divine powers were squandered without restraint. They created an island of Amazons, set up an anti-magic domain that would last for an unknown number of years, and gave them immortality. After that, they forgot all about this group of people after a night's sleep. No wonder these gods died. Usually, they wasted their divine power blindly, but when they fought, they found that they did not have enough divine power. They were really a group of examples of seeking death. Miss Thea, have you thought about the next step of the trip? If not, why don't you stay on our island for a few days? We have gatherings and competitions every day, and there is a bonfire party in the evening. It is very lively. Hippolyte had roughly confirmed that Thea was not a local by constantly beating around the bush. There were no other secrets that needed to be further confirmed. Thea was also very helpless. No matter how good her acting was, there were some things that could not be hidden. This shrewd old woman specifically asked questions that seemed to be common sense, but were actually very tricky.
For example, the bill submitted by the American senator was very unreasonable. The advertisement for America's participation in the war was very well done. Was that person a star or a real soldier, and so on?
Thea reluctantly confirmed that the current era was not bad. The plot of Wonder Woman had not yet started. It was now March 1918, a few months before the official start. But she did not dare to answer Hippolyte's question. Her history score was average. She might remember the president of 1918, but senators? How could she remember the names of so many senators? As for the war advertisement, she had never even seen it. The only person she knew who was a soldier and a star was Captain America. But that was in World War II or the next universe. The result of her being unable to answer was that it triggered Hippolyte's above words, which seemed gentle, but in fact, it was irresistible. Of course, Thea could run out. At this time, Wonder Woman was not confident, or the time was not up. There was no absolute strength to stop her. She could certainly run if she wanted to. But if she ran out, where could she go? How could she go back to the original time and space? Waiting for the Wave Rider to find her was one way, but could they find her? The Eye of Arcane Core was blown up, and Gideon could no longer receive the signal transmitted through the time stream. How could they find her at any point in time? Even if they had the intention, Thea did not have the patience to wait. If she stayed on Paradise Island, the land blessed by the gods, she might be able to find a way back. If she did not leave, what awaited her was definitely the truth lasso. This artifact could make anyone speak the truth, and it had never failed. She had a lot of secrets, and she could not let them know. No matter how hard she thought about it, she still couldn't make up her mind. Just when she finally made up her mind and was about to get on the skateboard and slip away, a huge beam of light shot up into the sky from a building not far away. The light was different from the fierce and direct sunlight. Instead, it had a hint of tranquility and serenity. This is... Before Thea could understand what was going on, Hippolyte's expression changed drastically. She did not care about her, nor did she bring her entourage with her. She whipped her horse and galloped towards the beam of light. Chapter 187. A group of female warriors exclaimed, "Is that the direction of the temple? Are the gods going to descend again? Don't be ridiculous. It's most likely an oracle." The female warriors, who were still aggressive just a moment ago, changed as soon as Hippolyte left. A group of women began to discuss all kinds of things. The most imaginative one even said that the gods had nothing better to do and wanted to send another naughty child to the queen. Thea ignored the female warriors who had turned into ducks in a second, and rode her horse to the naughty child Diana's side. She stretched out her hand and said, "Thea Quinn." The tall girl was a little stunned. She seemed to be wondering why Thea was talking to her. Fortunately, she reacted quickly and held Thea's hand. "Diana, I don't have a surname." Ha, it was indeed her, the only female among the elders of the Justice League. She finally met her in person today. Speaking of which, this was the third time that Thea had met the leader of the Justice League. However, compared to the confused Superman and the devastated Batman, the current Diana seemed very young and inexperienced. Her tone was full of uncertainty. She was still far from the heroine who would take charge of the Justice League in the future. "Do you know what's going on over there?" Thea asked. It was not strange for her to ask now. There were more than 100 people around them discussing. One more person would not make a difference. There was no need to avoid it. The honest Diana did not know that she had nothing to say. She thought seriously for a few seconds before shaking her head and said, "I don't know." But looking at Mother's expression, it should be something urgent. Thea felt more and more unkind now. The people she dealt with every day were gods or demigods like Horus and Diana. It was too challenging her personality. She cleared her throat and said, "Over there is your temple. Which gods do you serve?" This time, Diana answered very decisively. She started to talk about Zeus and gestured as she spoke. When she talked about the great achievements of a certain god, the worship on her face from the bottom of her heart made Thea feel a little stunned. So beautiful! The sun shone on the side of her face. Her eyelashes were extremely long, and her facial features revealed a kind of classical Greek beauty. The lines of her face were different from the gentleness of later generations. Instead, they were somewhat tough, but not disgusting. On the contrary, this kind of strong facial contour reflected her firm character. At this time, she still had long braids. She didn't have the big waves that she would later have, but the freshness of her hair was still intoxicating. Her gaze was like the ocean, calm and deep, as if there was a story behind it. However, if you angered her, you would have to face raging waves. This woman was simply perfect. Thea had seen her fair share of beauties. Be it Madame Shiva's aloofness, Catwoman's elegance, or even Felicity's quick-wittedness, all of them paled in comparison. Her looks were a notch above the rest, but that wasn't the main point. Instead, it was the never-ending fighting spirit and uncompromising conviction in her body that elevated her temperament to an almost extreme level. This was the most promising aspect of her as a heroine. At that time Hercules said, "What are you looking at?" Diana was still talking about the story made up by her mother. When she saw Thea staring at her with bright eyes, she couldn't help but stop. Thea knew that she was a little too focused. She was a real demigod, and her gaze was too long. It surprised her, so she quickly changed the topic. "I'm looking at your eyes. Your eyes can see very far, right?" Diana was a little speechless. She was not stupid. She knew that she shouldn't reveal her secret to Thea, who she had just met. However, she was not as straightforward as Thea, who could make up lies like drinking water. While she was thinking about how to explain, Hippolyte came back on horseback, panting. She was a little confused when she saw the two of them together, but she still said to Diana, "I'll interrupt you for a moment, my dear." Then she turned to Thea and said, "Can you talk with me?" Thea certainly couldn't say no. She obediently followed Hippolyte to a corner. At the same time she thought to herself, "Why did this old woman call me? Is she going to do something dirty? She doesn't look like it." Although her body has been trained for a long time, she is far from Diana's oppressive aura. If they really fought, Thea would win. "Are you from another world?" Hippolyte didn't give her too much time to think and asked suddenly. Thea's face changed instantly. She found out so quickly? It was not wrong for her to say that she was from another world, but the word world was too vague. Time, space, and even higher latitudes could be called another world. How much did she know? The dramatic change in Thea's face couldn't be hidden from the queen who had been working in human affairs for 5,000 years. Hippolyte was very satisfied with the result of her test. At this time, she completely let down her guard and said, "It's our temple that sent an oracle to announce your arrival. From now on, you are our distinguished guest." In fact, the oracle was extremely vague, and the voice transmission was too weak. Hippolyte combined her various guesses and finally came up with such an answer that was a little far from the truth. Thea scratched her head. It doesn't matter if she is from another world. Maybe their god was afraid that she would say too much and change history, so he gave her a little change? She had to say that because of the power of Horus in the other world, she misjudged the era when the gods were lying at home and eating subsistence. She felt that the gods knew everything and were omnipotent. She carefully tested Hippolyte for a long time, but she didn't get the answer she wanted. She only got the conclusion that the gods had a premonition that she was coming. "Diana, come on, you take Thea for a walk around. I have to go back and prepare for the ceremony." She didn't know how many years had passed since she received the oracle again. Hippolyte was very happy and was a lot nicer to her daughter. She didn't treat Thea as an outsider at all, so she took the army back first. Thea was a little confused. I haven't said anything yet, and I'm already cleared of suspicion? Although she didn't understand what the gods had eaten wrong and let her in without asking, it was a good thing that she didn't have to escape at night. She began to run around the island with Diana. At first, Diana was afraid that her riding skills were not good enough, so she slowed down. But after running for a while, she found that she was almost one with the horse. There were only a few people on the island who could match her riding skills. Thea was competitive and said that she wanted to compete with her riding skills. She could feel the emotions of the horse from time to time. She only felt that the horse was as if it had taken stimulants, and it was always transmitting signals like it was very happy and comfortable. In any case, they didn't need to run on their own. If you want to compete, then so be it. The 2 men and 2 horses began to run in circles around the island. Chapter 188. After half a lap, Thea automatically slowed down her horse. She could tell that Diana was an excellent equestrian. Besides, the horse she was riding was much better than hers. She would be asking for trouble if she wanted to race with her. Thea did not need to be so outstanding. As she slowed down, Diana slowed down and started to introduce some landmarks to her. The total area of Paradise Island was quite large, but the central residential area was much smaller. There were only a few simple buildings, a temple, a sacrificial square, a training ground, and a residential area for the warriors. Thea rode her horse slowly. She saw that all the women were training hard, such as javelin throwing, fighting and archery, which Thea was most familiar with. Is there no one on your island who is involved in production? She went around the island but did not see a single farmer or herder. Everyone was busy practicing martial arts. When they met their relatives, they would use muscle break, and when they greeted their friends, they would use shield bash. Thea was not used to this kind of daily communication. Production? Are you talking about animal husbandry? I've read a paper written by Dr. Michel in 1915 about animal husbandry and professional feed. Thea crossed her arms and listened to Diana's long speech about how to raise chickens, ducks and geese, and how to plan the site systematically and scientifically. She was speechless when she heard that. It was obvious that this girl had been stifled for a long time. She clearly had the potential to be a scholar, but she was reincarnated into a place where people used their fists more than their brains. It was not appropriate to interrupt her directly, so she had to listen patiently. Diana talked a lot, from climate to soil and water to environmental factors. Finally, she concluded, the food on our island is provided by God, so we don't have to waste our energy. Well, Thea's face twitched. To put it nicely, this girl was simple-minded. To put it bluntly, she was simple-minded. She looked curvy, but her mental age was still too young. No wonder she was charmed by Steve Trevor. Yes, a beautiful girl was charmed by a man because she had never seen a man before. Sia had seen Steve Trevor's photo in the original spacetime. It was likely that he had some fortuitous encounter on Paradise Island. Almost 100 years had passed, and he still looked like a middle-aged man with a serious expression. He was still a distance away from being handsome. At least, Sia felt that he was far less handsome than Tommy and Oliver. As the leader of the Heaven's Eye Society, there were many people who attacked him openly and secretly. For example, Amanda Waller and Lila Michaels, who had already signed a treaty of friendship with Sia and were considered quasi-allies, would badmouth him for no reason, saying that he was dictatorial, undemocratic, and so on. Sia was more or less affected by it. Now that she thought about how such a white lotus had been bitten by a pig, she was even more upset. She was still a child. How could you do that? Steve Trevor must die. Well, I can't affect history. When the time comes, I'll just hide with Diana as far away as possible. Even if I meet him, Thea will do her best to break them up. Diana didn't know that Thea was thinking about her marriage. Looking at her solemn face, she thought that she was thinking about what she said about animal husbandry. For the first time in her life, she felt the joy of being valued. She happily pulled Thea and continued to walk around. The 2 girls walked around the island for the whole afternoon and finally rushed back to the residential area before dinner. For people who were used to modern sound and light effects, this almost primitive style of sacrificial ceremony was indeed a little different. All the residents of the island participated in this bonfire party to prove that the gods were still paying attention to them. Looking at them singing ancient battle songs and waving their limbs enthusiastically, Thea was a little sad. They probably knew that the gods had fallen, but they still had a little bit of hope in their hearts. Now that they had received the exact news, they could no longer suppress the excitement in their hearts. This was a kind of redemption of faith, excitement and joy. But in this grand ceremony, there was still a trace of disharmony. She's over there. She's sitting on a stone chair and wearing red clothes. Artemis, that's not good. She's the queen's guest. A few chaotic voices entered Thea's ears. Red clothes. Thea didn't need to look around to know who they were talking about. Within a 10-mile radius of this island, she was the only one wearing red clothes. Sure enough, there were idiots everywhere. Paradise Island was not a paradise. Just as she was wondering which weakling was here to pick a fight, a black tower-like figure stood in front of her. Her voice was not loud, but her words were not friendly. Outsider, don't think that today's sacrificial ceremony is held for you. This is our tradition, do you understand? Her voice was slightly suppressed at first, but as she spoke, her voice became louder and louder. Who is this? Thea squinted her eyes and looked at the humanoid creature standing in front of her. Oh my God, this is too scary. It was already night. Although many torches were lit, the light was still flickering. At first, Thea did not notice this person when she first walked up to her.
It was not until she spoke that she realized that there was a living person standing in front of her.
This person was too dark. But under the light of the fire, she found that she was not the kind of black people on the African continent. After all, it was still strange for a black person to be mixed in with a group of white Amazons. She did not know if this person was born with dark skin or acquired it after being tanned. At night, her body reflected the oily light, revealing a body that was considered exaggerated even among men. There were 4 or 5 women behind this strong woman. When they saw Thea's eyes, they avoided her gaze. You are. Thea never avoided challenges. On the contrary, she had the courage to face any challenge, but she did not want to be used as a tool for nothing.
She did not believe that the person who instigated this fool to come here did not have any political demands in the dark.
It was nothing more than the grievances accumulated over the 5,000 years of Hippolyte's rule. Now that they had found an outlet, they wanted to defeat her and attack the political prestige of the queen. Alas, Thea sighed. Sure enough, humans were the most complicated animals. Whether they were born naturally or made of mud, they all had this bad habit. The strong woman clenched her left hand into a fist and slapped her almost muscular chest. I am Artemis. Thea was stunned for a few seconds.
Haha, I'm dying of laughter.
She laughed until she was out of breath and pounded on the stone table in front of her. She wasn't trying to provoke him. She really couldn't hold it in. Artemis was the legendary goddess of the hunt and the moon. Although she wasn't as beautiful as Aphrodite, the goddess of love, she was still one of the most beautiful women in the Greek pantheon. In the afternoon, Diana had told her that they had a tradition of giving the name of a god to someone in their tribe as a recognition. But Thea really did not expect that the name of the beautiful goddess of the night would be given to this charcoal head. Chapter 189. No matter how she looked at the person in front of her, she did not fit the image of someone who walked through the forest like the wind, quiet like a virgin, and moving like a fleeing rabbit. You guys think that God is not completely dead yet, so you chose this person. You guys are trying to anger him to death, aren't you? Thinking of this, Thea could no longer hold back her expression. She pointed at the brawny woman's dark face and laughed. Her provocation had achieved its desired effect. The brawny woman was so angry that she gritted her teeth. Her already huge eyes almost popped out of their sockets. She pointed at Thea with trembling lips. You. She could not finish her sentence for a long time. Thea laughed for a while and recovered some of her emotions. She covered her mouth and lowered her head. Sorry, I'm not laughing at you, haha. I'm really not laughing at you. Her explanation was insincere. The Amazons were simple, but they were not fools. Me? I want. The brawny woman thought for a long time but could not figure out what to do. At this time, someone behind her hesitated and whispered a few words in her ear. The brawny woman's expression changed drastically. However, under the persuasion of her companions, she still said to Thea with some hesitation, I want to launch a divine name challenge. I bet on my divine name. According to the rules, you must accept the challenge, outsider. Artemis, what are you doing? Thea is not one of us. She is not bound by the rules of the tribe. Before Thea could answer, Diana, who heard something unusual, had already separated the crowd and walked over. After hearing the brawny woman's words, she was a little surprised and then angry. What do you think the honor of God is? Is this something that you can bet on? Diana's last few words were a little loud. They involuntarily attracted the attention of the Amazons who were still singing and dancing nearby. A few people around her stopped dancing instantly, wanting to see what was going on. Under the collateral effect, the surroundings quickly quieted down. They looked at each other, gathered in twos and threes, and whispered to each other, exchanging what they knew about the incident. At this time, the tanned woman was also a little regretful. However, the arrow was already on the bow, and there was no way back. She would rather break than admit her mistake. She might as well kill her. At this point, she could only persevere to the end. She straightened her neck and looked at Diana without showing any signs of weakness. This is the right that God has given me. I will bet everything I have, my life and honor. The tanned woman had completely calmed down at this point. She looked at Diana with a burning desire to fight. This made Sia a little confused. Is he challenging me to a duel? Why are you looking at Diana? Could it be that the tradition here is that whoever comes to mediate a fight should beat up the mediator first? What a delightful tradition. She crossed her arms and didn't say anything. After staring at Diana for a long time, the tanned strong woman finally remembered who she was. She looked at Miss Thea unhappily. What is the challenge? Thea definitely wouldn't back down. Looking at the black woman's strong physique, she knew that it wouldn't be a competition of advanced mathematics or programming, but she still had to ask. Wait a minute. Hippolyte interrupted their conversation in a timely manner. Although Thea's magic was now sealed, her spiritual power was still there. She had long discovered that the queen was hiding in the distance and watching them. She didn't jump out until the situation was almost out of control. Fortunately, the people here were simple and honest, so they didn't shout, "Long live." Sia also followed the crowd and bowed slightly as a greeting. Artemis, do you know what you are doing? Hippolyte looked anxious, just like a good queen who loved her people like her own children. For Sia, who followed Moira every day, this expression was too familiar. It was the kind of expression that gazed at you with care, but in fact, she was cursing you in her heart. Why didn't you just die? But the simple Amazon people liked this. The tanned strong woman knelt on one knee and shouted with all the strength in her chest. I know, I am willing to bear everything. If I fail, I will leave my home and go to the outside world to wait for death. Her words were resolute and unwavering, which made Thea, who was originally watching the fun, a little moved. Hippolyte's eyes showed a hint of joy, but she quickly put on the expression of a loving mother and hugged the tanned strong woman who was kneeling. Why are you doing this? Are they instigating you? She looked at the people behind her and secretly remembered their names. The queen with excellent political skills needed to pull out the radish and bring out the mud. She didn't care about a brainless black woman. But the tanned strong woman was not as cunning as her. She had already forgotten that she was instigated to make trouble. She insisted that it was her idea, and no one instigated her. Well, then I can only bless you, my child. May the lightning of the Heavenly Father always illuminate your road ahead. Hippolyte showed off her acting skills and gained a lot of support. She then turned to ask Thea. As a respected guest, it seems rude of me to say this, but are you willing to accept her challenge? If you win, you will get the divine name of the moon god. At that time, you will be our sister, and we will be inseparable. I'm willing. Thea couldn't back down. As for what would happen if she lost, she didn't think about it. According to the tanned strong woman, if she lost, she would have to leave the island. For them, leaving the island was more important than losing their lives. But for Thea, all that was left was Hee. In order to take care of the feelings of the people on the island, Hippolyte couldn't support her publicly. She secretly gave her a look that said, I'm very optimistic about you. As for winning or losing, she didn't care about it. No matter what, it was beneficial to her. Hippolyte then left with a few guards. Thea, you shouldn't have agreed. Diana, who was now a friend, waited for the crowd to disperse and said with some urgency. This simple child didn't know the intricate relationship behind this. She just saw the upcoming duel. Speaking of the duel, Thea remembered. Damn it! These people didn't tell her how she was going to challenge them. Fortunately, there was someone in front of her who understood.
That tanned strong woman just now. Thea pointed at the tanned strong woman who had already walked away.
What is she going to challenge? Diana's small mouth opened slightly. She was a little surprised. You don't know? You accepted the challenge without knowing? Thea looked at her speechlessly. How would I know? No one told me.
Is it in the arena over there?
When Thea came, she saw the circular arena full of ancient Roman style. She didn't know if it was originally there or built later, but it looked very imposing. No, you are going to accept the divine name of the moon god. The time and the method of the duel are not set.
These are all things that the elders of the moon god's priestly group need to ask for the oracle.
Diana carefully explained to her. What are the elders of the priestly group? Everyone here looked the same, and she couldn't use the eye of Horus to observe them. She really couldn't remember if she had seen these old women before. Chapter 190. Since Diana didn't know either, Thea decided to put the matter aside. As for the oracle? Who are you kidding? Why did you find such a dark and strong guy with the name of the goddess of the night above his head? Is this a god's approval?
Most of the competitions were arranged by a few old guys according to the conditions that were favorable to them.
You guys can just bully the goddess who can't move and use the name of the gods to fool her.
Sia had an expression as if she had already seen through it.
She pulled Diana, who was still thinking about the challenges, back to the temporary residence. Diana, who was a warm-hearted person and also wanted to know what the outside world was like, told her mother and moved in with Thea. Thea was organizing her equipment. She didn't have many things with her, and only a few items with magic attributes could be put into the tattoo space. She wrapped the USB flash drive given by Captain Frosty with magic and sent it into the tattoo space. Now the tattoo space was completely sealed, and she didn't know what was going on inside. The Kevlar on her body had automatically appeared after the fusion was removed.
The skateboard had been conveniently placed in the pocket of her combat suit at the time, and the mechanical arm had also been disguised as an accessory.
These pieces of equipment had all escaped the disaster. The only pity was that the bow and infrared glasses that had been with her for almost 2 years were lost in the explosion. She was deeply regretful. Just as she was lamenting the lack of space, Diana came to her with a few sets of clothes. Is this for me?
Thea raised the linen robe in front of her and looked at it carefully.
It was just ordinary linen clothes, the kind that could be worn by any body type.
The process of changing clothes was actually the process of taking off the combat suit. Diana exclaimed.
Oh, this is underwear, right? I've only seen pictures of it in books. It looks very smooth. Let me touch it. Hey, don't run away. Thea didn't expect to be teased by little white flower. She was a little depressed. She quickly put on the clothes that looked like a sack and tied a cloth belt around her waist. Where are we going? The two of them left the residence with Diana leading the way. The two of them slowly walked through the neighborhood. When they arrived at the entrance of a cave, Thea could not help but ask. If she didn't know that this woman was the future Wonder Woman, she would have thought that she was going to do something shady. What was she doing in a cave at night instead of sleeping? The bathing pool was given to us by the gods. Don't you outsiders take a bath? I heard that the Black Death is everywhere.
Before Diana could continue her tirade, Thea quickly interrupted her.
Stop, stop. There's no more Black Death outside, and we also bathe regularly. Thea could see through her. This girl's curiosity about the outside world was so strong that it was about to explode. The more curious she was, the more her mother would not allow her to go out. She could only desperately read those messy books, and this vicious cycle made her even more curious. She sighed. Her destiny was definitely outside, and this small island could not bind her. Her mother must have realized this as well, which was why she allowed her to fool around with her. Not long after they entered the cave, they saw a pool of clear water. However, it looked a little green against the stone walls of the cave. Diana was dressed very simply, or rather, the entire Amazon tribe was dressed very simply. She took off her half-body armor, tugged on her skirt, and swung her shoes. There was nothing else. Her beauty was indeed amazing. The gods' blessings made her body reach the peak of human beauty. Despite Thea's many adventures, she was still not as beautiful as Diana. Her body was even more tragic, so it was better not to mention it. Seeing that an ancient person like her was so honest, as an open-minded person from the 21st century, there was nothing to be shy about. Thea took off her clothes that were like a sack, undid her underwear, and tested the water temperature. It was not as cold as she had imagined. Instead, it had the fragrance of plants and the slight warmth of a hot spring. Not bad. You Amazons really know how to enjoy life, Thea said as she unconsciously turned to look at Diana. However, she almost fell into the pool. At this moment, the honest beauty was holding her underwear and gently touching it. She seemed to feel that it was not bad and even brought it to her nose to sniff it. Just as she was about to taste it with her tongue, Thea snatched it away. Diana, this is very personal. It's rude of you to touch it like this. Oh, I'm sorry, but you smell really good. Are all outsiders like you? Diana immediately admitted her mistake, but she still asked curiously. The two beauties were standing and chatting so honestly, and they were even talking about a very serious topic. This scene was not harmonious at all. Thea quickly pulled her into the pool until her body was completely submerged in the water. She felt inexplicably relieved. As for her so-called good smell, although it was a little shameful, Thea had already noticed it. Her good relatives had not visited for a while. Whether she admitted it or not, as she absorbed more and more light, she was getting further and further away from being a pure earthling. In the end, she was not sure whether she would become a divine creature or a new species. I'm a hero. How can everyone be like me? Thea was very proud of this. If all the people on Earth were at her level, the world would have been in chaos. Who knew whether the Kryptonians or the Earthlings would invade each other? Hey, what are you doing? Thea was about to take advantage of the fact that she did not know anything to boast, but before she could finish, she felt that she was very close to her. Thea looked serious, and her nose twitched slightly. You are indeed not an ordinary person. Your smell is far beyond what is recorded in the books. Are you also a child of God? Diana was getting more and more curious about this guy who had fallen from the sky. She and the girls on the island had lived for thousands of years, but except for a few people, she did not have a good relationship with the rest of them. Of course, it was partly because of Hippolyte's protection, but also because she did not fit in with the group. She had tried to improve her relationship with them, but the smell of those people made her naturally unable to get close to them. For a long time, she even thought that she was an alien living alone in the world, a pitiful worm that no one understood and sympathized with. Now that she had met Miss Thea, who was originally not in the timeline, she seemed to have found her own kind in an instant. And Thea's sunshine and tranquility unconsciously attracted her. This was not an attraction in temperament or appearance, but it was a kind of touch in the deepest part of her soul. In fact, she did not understand it, but it was a mutual attraction of divinity. A child of God? Thea was a little surprised. If Malcolm heard this, he would be happy to be called a god by a demigod. Unfortunately, this was just a beautiful misunderstanding. Thea turned slightly to let her see her unicorn tattoo. This is my bloodline mark. My ability comes from this. Fortunately, she was quite knowledgeable. She rambled on about the origin of living things to Diana. If someone were to eavesdrop on them, they would definitely think that two expectant mothers were discussing the problem of giving birth. In fact, they were light years away from that stage. The two sat in the pool very honestly, and talked about the process of the birth of life. Halfway through, Diana compared the theories she read from many casual books with Thea's explanation. She found that what the book said was very accurate. Thea was a little speechless about the books that she was holding on to. What's the point of just talking about theories? The most important thing is to combine theory with reality. Come, lie down, I'll tell you the truth. Indescribable scenes floated past. The two returned to their room refreshed. Thea was like a caring sister who kept answering Diana's various questions. Fortunately, the original Thea was quite good at her studies. The fusion transmigrator also read more books. She could barely cope with Diana's questions from the sky to the sea. Later on, Thea's head became heavier and heavier, and she fell asleep in the midst of the endless questions. Thea, get up. Get up. Do you people from the outside world all sleep like you? Diana woke up early and found that she was still asleep. She did not disturb her. According to the tribal practice, she went out to practice martial arts and went through a lot of trouble. After breakfast, she came back and found that Thea was still sleeping. The quality of sleep was too good. We shouted loudly outside. Didn't you hear us? Thea sat up in a daze. She did not feel that there was a problem. How many young people did not like to sleep? Besides, Her physique was the type that would grow naturally even if she did not exercise. There was no need for her to train in the hottest days of summer or winter. Before she finished yawning, an old woman in a robe walked out from behind Diana. "Miss Thea, good morning. It seems that you had a good rest. This morning, we will hold the first competition of Artemis in the square. You must maintain your strength."
After that, the old woman patted her on the shoulder as if she was concerned.
She left the hut with a smile on her face. Diana was also a little confused about the old woman who came and left in a hurry. She did not wait for Thea to wake up and ran away after saying a few words. She said it too simply. "She didn't tell you what the competition was. This is against the rules." Thea waved her hand. This old woman was obviously an opponent of Hippolyte. She was just skirting the boundaries of the process. Did she mention the process? She said it. But she did not say everything. At most, she would say that she was not meticulous in her work. There was no big problem. But her purpose was very vicious. She was determined to teach Thea a lesson and finally destroy the reputation of Diana's mother. Thea was quite familiar with this kind of method. This kind of workplace method of making things difficult for others was a bit unpresentable. However, although she was familiar with it, she was definitely unhappy. She thought to herself, "Old woman, I'll remember your face. Just you wait. In a few months when the Germans come, I will not save you even if you die in front of me." After putting on her clothes, she pulled Diana, who was still angry. "Let's go. Take me to breakfast first." When they arrived at the cafeteria, Thea was a little uneasy. This group of people was too explicit. They did not even leave breakfast for her. They used the excuse of exercising too much in the morning and finished it all. "If you want to eat, come early tomorrow. We are militarized. That's it. You can do whatever you want." Fortunately, Thea was not an ordinary person. She did not feel hungry even if she did not eat for 10 days or half a month. Her daily consumption was various kinds of light in her body. Now, her absorption ability was banned, but her body was still there. Thea missed the breakfast on the Wave Rider very much. No matter how unpleasant Gideon was to her, he did not say that she should starve. Sure enough, the worst thing these days was people. Whether they were born naturally or made of mud, they were all bad. No wonder those artificial intelligences wanted to destroy the world after awakening. People were so bad that even machines could not stand it. If you don't want to eat, then don't eat. Thea angrily followed Diana to the square. Chapter 192. This was the second time Thea had come to their tribal square. Unlike the grand celebration last night, the square was filled with a solemn and dignified atmosphere. It was about the size of 4 football fields, and the ground was paved with green bricks. When walking on it, one wouldn't feel uneven at all, as if it was flat ground. Needless to say, this must be the work of the gods who had nothing better to do. The people here regarded fighting as glory and labor as a disgrace. They would not even pick up the fallen soy sauce. This road was definitely not built by them. At least, Thea did not see any excavators or other engineering equipment here. With their productivity and values, how could they build such a flat road without the intervention of divine power? There was no rostrum at the scene, and no one was playing the athlete's march. There were only 2 participants. Thea saw a strong woman standing straight as soon as she entered the square. The woman was about 1.8 meters tall and was the second tallest woman after Diana. Her muscles were like cast iron. Her eyes were closed, and her nose was slightly trembling. It was obvious that she was very nervous now. Thea did not care. She did not care about the name of the gods at all. Seeing Hippolyte standing in the middle, she went forward to greet her out of courtesy. "Your Majesty, how was your rest? Diana did not disturb you, did she?" At this time, Hippolyte was full of smiles. She took her hand and chatted with her for a while. Then she turned her head and introduced her to her. "This is my sister, Diana's teacher, Antiope." "Oh, Wonder Woman's teacher." Thea looked at the capable middle-aged woman and bowed slightly. "I've heard a lot about you." Antiope frowned. "Miss Thea, do you know martial arts?" It could not be helped. After the awakening of her sorcerer bloodline, Thea was too deceptive. Her muscles were not obvious, and people would only think that she was working out. Compared to the women on Paradise Island who had bulging muscles, there was a huge visual difference. Thea was a little embarrassed to answer her question. When she was wandering around with Diana, she had seen the female warriors on the island practicing martial arts. Of course, they did not hide it from her. Their martial arts were very skillful and simple.
Perhaps it was because of their immortality. Their individual foundations were very solid. Whether it was archery, combat, or various combinations of swords and shields, they used them very well. However, their fighting style was too ancient. Modern society had been developing for thousands of years, and countless elites had added their own understanding to their fighting style. Although their lifespan was not as long as the female warriors of Paradise Island, their fighting knowledge had been passed down from generation to generation. The accumulation of knowledge was terrifying. On the contrary, the Amazonian female warriors had become more and more conservative because of their infinite lifespan. If the fighting level of the outside world had improved by 4,000 years, they had only improved by 200 years. Thea was very confident in defeating them. If she didn't use any strengthening spells, she could defeat 5 to 7 female warriors with her bare hands. This was under the condition that their physical fitness was higher than that of human beings. If she activated all her technological equipment to recover her magic power, then they would all die. Now, in the face of Antiope's question, they directly answered that they were all a bunch of weaklings? Definitely not. She could only evade the question and say, I practiced at home. As for what level they were at, they would see for themselves later. Hippolyte introduced her to the 3 middle-aged women in robes on the other side. One of them nodded to Thea with a serious face and ignored her. The other 2 were much more enthusiastic, and one of them was the woman who informed her about the competition in the morning. With Hippolyte's introduction, Thea knew that the 3 of them were priests of the temple. However, their miracles were rare now. The 3 priests were responsible for the daily worship of the 12 main gods of Olympus. Hearing this, Thea almost laughed again. You're too impious. If there is no miracle, you will reduce the number of priests? You will arrange for the clergy to have secondary jobs? Needless to say, it must be Diana's mother who did this. She changed the priests into warriors under her direct leadership. It would be strange if the remaining priests were of the same mind as her. Thea was really not interested in participating in this kind of traditional struggle between theocracy and royalty. This kind of thing could be seen everywhere in Europe's thousands of years of history. It was not rare. Thea chatted with a few leaders who seemed to be the leaders of the country, but in fact, the population under their jurisdiction was not even comparable to a village. She stood alone and rested. She originally wanted to find a place to sit, but when she saw several village leaders standing under the hot sun, she could only swallow her words. As a quasi-military management, the people of Amazon gathered very quickly. Thea stood for less than 5 minutes, and a large number of female warriors had walked into the venue. They stood in rows and rows, ready to be quiet spectators. Everyone is here? Thea was curious. How many people were there? It was too inefficient to count them one by one. She secretly opened the Eye of Horus, glanced at them, and instantly understood. 1,550 people. The people on the field just felt a chill and did not notice anything strange, but Diana stared at her eyes in surprise. What did she feel just now? Divine power. Although it was completely different from her divine power, the nature was definitely not wrong. That was the real divine power. Was this girl named Thea the child of God? Diana was a little confused. Hippolyte waited for everyone to arrive and loudly announced the start of the Divine Name Challenge. In fact, there was a bit of a logical problem with calling it a challenge. Thea was muddle-headed and was challenged, but the other party put everything on the line, and several village leaders acquiesced to the name of the challenge. There should have been a segment to introduce the 2 sides, nothing more than who this person was, what achievement she had, why she came to challenge, and so on. But now Thea was not one of them, and they did not know what advanced deeds Thea had done. Who knew if what she said was true or false? They could not use the truth lasso to extort a confession before the competition, right? That would be too disrespectful to the gods. They thought about it and decided to skip this step. Hippolyte motioned for everyone to be quiet and roughly told them about the past of Artemis. The Amazons all knew about it, but Sia didn't care. She just said a few words in a neutral tone. Then several priests pushed each other, and finally the cunning old woman that Thea saw in the morning walked out of the crowd and shouted, Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, and her oracle tells us that the first game is javelin throwing. Wow! Everyone exclaimed. It could not be helped. Although Thea was 1.7 meters tall,
She was of average height among these people. Compared with the muscular women, she was definitely thin and weak. On the other hand, the dark-skinned woman was 1.8 meters tall, and her arms were as thick as Xia's thighs. She looked like a person with great strength. The basic conditions of this competition were clearly unfair. Chapter 193.
Xia was well aware that these old fellows were up to no good.
They had chosen the right time to do so. Normal people would not be able to sleep well on their first night in a new environment and guessing the content of the competition. However, Thea woke up naturally as if nothing had happened. Since their first plan did not work, they came up with a second one. They took advantage of the fact that she had just woken up and was not fully awake to call for a meeting. They even cancelled breakfast in order to cause Thea to be mentally and physically exhausted. Then, they called out the tanned and strong woman who had been recuperating for a long time to compete. Moreover, the opponent seemed to be good at throwing javelins. Looking at Thea's small arms and legs, and the opponent's tall and strong figure, there was almost no suspense in this competition. The worst priest looked at Thea with a smile. Although he looked kind, he was thinking about how to lead the topic to Thea when this outsider begged for mercy and quit. This bastard. Thea smiled and looked at the people around her who were pointing at her. She thought to herself, if this old thing was an employee of the Quinn Group, he would definitely arrange for her to go to Siberia to experience life.
Hey, can you?
Diana asked quietly when she saw Thea's indifferent expression. It was no wonder that she was worried. The anti-magic territory on this island was too strong. Thea was directly sealed. As a demigod, Diana was stronger, but more than half of her divine power was also sealed. She grew up in a high anti-magic territory and did not realize how strong she was before she left the island. Thea nodded, of course, to show that she was fine. Just watch. Ever since she figured out the intention of these people, she equipped the mechanical arm under her battlesuit. It fit her arm perfectly and was covered by her clothes. You want to play dirty with me? I'll play with you. Originally, I wanted to have a fair competition, but they did not intend to play fair at all. Since they did not follow the rules of the game, Thea was ready to let them know what it meant to be strong. Time passed quickly, and a female warrior carrying 2 javelins arrived in front of several faction leaders. Hippolyte also didn't expect that these people would make such a low-skill competition. Although Xia's victory or defeat didn't affect her much, it was better to win than to lose. She picked up 2 javelins and looked at them. Not bad, they didn't tamper with them. When Thea and the dark-skinned woman stepped forward to take the javelin, she whispered to Thea, "Don't feel pressured. It doesn't matter if we win or lose." Thea responded with a bright smile. Am I cheating? He still couldn't win? Not to mention this He Dazhuang, even if Diana personally went up against him, with such a strong anti-magic domain, she might not be as strong as him. The crowd automatically opened up a gap. Their meaning was very simple. You just have to throw it at a place where there is no one. Who's first? Thea saw that He Dazhuang was angry and didn't speak, so she could only ask. She couldn't throw it at the same time, right? The other party shamelessly insisted that she threw the javelin in the distance. If Thea didn't want to explain, she would have to throw it again. Thinking of this scene, she felt that it was ridiculous. Moreover, this kind of scene with a large group of people watching was enough. Without waiting for He Dazhuang to reply, the priest who made Thea look very annoying jumped out again and said with a kind face, "You are the guest, let Artemis go first." Thea nodded and took a few steps back. This old guy wanted to let the dark-skinned woman get a good result to destroy her confidence. She waved her hand and motioned for them to go first. Because this was not a formal competition, there was no boundary on the ground. The referee's standard was the eyes of the audience. If you ran 2 steps, no one would say anything. He Dazhuang adjusted his breathing and raised his state to the peak. He picked up the javelin with his right hand and ran fiercely. Thump, thump. The low sound of footsteps accompanied his footsteps for more than 10 meters. He Dazhuang felt that all the muscles in his body had been fully mobilized. He kicked the ground, twisted his waist, and bent his arms. The momentum of the whole person jumped to the extreme, and then burst out in an instant. Ah! The javelin in his hand flew out like lightning, passing through countless people's retinas, drawing a beautiful arc and plunging into the soil in the distance. Not bad. Thea looked at it a little. It was 500 feet, converted into meters it was 150 meters. Amazing. The world record for the javelin was a little more than 100 meters. This guy easily broke the world record by 50 meters.
This group of guys who were molded out of the earth really had a higher physical fitness than the human extreme value.
The priests who deserved to be beaten probably knew this and proposed this competition.
The surrounding discussion finally sounded at this time, and several priests on the high ground did not have the intention to stop it.
Artemis, this is probably the best result in her life. Some of the people close to He Dazhuang said with envy.
I'm afraid that stranger is in trouble.
This was a cynical remark of a neutral nature. The only one who had a good attitude towards Thea, Diana, was dragged by Hippolyte and did not participate in the discussion. Thea directly ignored the noise around her. A while ago, the major media in Star City scolded her miserably, but she was indifferent. These people's gossip could not shake her mind at all. What's more, she did not need any mind. The mechanical arm was fully powered, and the strength value was increased to about 5 tons. He Dazhuang could not even reach 1 ton. She could easily crush her. Hey! Why is this person throwing with his left arm?
Left-handed?
Her posture is so amateur. Has she never thrown before? The onlookers discussed with each other. Thea was also very helpless. She really did not practice the javelin. She had seen it on TV, but she had never touched it in reality. Moira's goal was to cultivate a lady. When she was young, she learned piano, yoga and so on. Who would teach their daughter to practice the javelin? Old Ma and Ms. Shiva were also skilled in martial arts. Perhaps the only person Thea knew who could throw the javelin was Batman. However, she had to put a question mark because she had never seen the old man use it. The surrounding people's discussion made her a little depressed. The tone of these people was completely like they were talking about a country bumpkin. This person has never practiced the javelin. Their tone was like saying that modern people had never touched the internet. Come on. Who in modern society would practice this? You guys are the country bumpkins. Automatically shielding the surrounding noise, she shook the metal javelin. She did not have any flexibility, feel and so on. She also did not know those professional postures. Standing in place, she grabbed the javelin with her left hand and bent her arm a few times. The weight was as if it did not exist. She turned her head and looked at the bad priest who was about to faint with joy. Then I will throw it. You guys watch carefully. Well, we are watching. You can rest assured and throw it boldly. The bad priest was so happy that he almost laughed out loud, but he restrained himself. Chapter 194.
Thea looked at the old face with a smile and asked, Then I'll start. You must work hard and throw it far away with all your strength.
The bad priestess said as she made a throwing motion with an expression of encouragement. The two of them looked at each other and laughed happily.
Diana, who was at the side, was a little confused.
Thea began to make gestures on the spot. With her martial arts foundation and strong memory, such a simple throwing motion was not difficult at all. She could understand it at a glance, but she was not used to using her left hand to exert force. She tried it on the spot, but it was not coordinated. Forget it. I'm not practicing anymore. The force exertion method was not scientific, so the effect was definitely not as good. However, the force was too great. The run-up and lunge were useless. She bent her arm back and the mechanical arm operated at full power. Whoosh! She threw the javelin out. The metal javelin made a hissing sound in the air and disappeared from everyone's sight in 0.1 seconds. It turned into a small black dot and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. The scene was silent for a moment. What was the meaning of this? Other than Thea and Diana, who was somewhat sure that she was the child of God, everyone else was stunned. The bad priestess widened her eyes and glared at Thea, who was smiling like a flower. You trick. She did not know what to say. She wanted to say that the result did not count, but she was not so thick-skinned as to say that in front of thousands of people. Hippolyte looked at the three priestesses with a smile. What do you think of this result? As long as they said that the result did not count, she would immediately counterattack. There were so many people at the scene, and no one would support their nonsense. Let's discuss. The old priestess who had been silent all this time pulled two of her companions who were blushing. The three of them went to the side to discuss. They went to the side and whispered. The thousands of people at the scene were almost in an uproar. Did you see that? It flew to the horizon. That's terrifying. How can she have so much strength with such a small body? Could it be the divine power of Hercules? I wonder who is stronger, her or Diana. The crowd was whispering, but Thea did not care. She put away her mechanical arm and walked to Diana's side. Thea did not know that her actions had caused a new misunderstanding. She and Diana are very close. They are indeed the same type of people. As the three priests reached an agreement and returned to the center, the crowd quickly quieted down. The solemn leader of the priests pointed to a female warrior. Go and see, where did you throw it? You calculate the distance. She no longer had any hope for this competition, so she chose the neutral female warrior. She only wanted to get a result and end this awkward scene quickly. The female warrior glanced at Hippolyte and got the queen's nod. Then she mounted her horse and galloped in the direction where the javelin had disappeared. 15 minutes later, the female warrior rode back with an anxious look on her face. Turning over and dismounting, the female warrior knelt on one knee. I swear to God that what I said is true. Several leaders nodded and motioned her to continue. The female warrior glanced at Thea with a little fear. I found the javelin thrown by this distinguished guest 2 miles away. At that time, the head of the javelin was inserted into the rock, a foot deep. Her voice was not small, and the people around her heard it clearly. It was strange enough that the javelin had flown 2 miles, but now the head of the javelin was inserted into the rock by a foot. There were 1,500 people in the Amazon tribe who could not throw javelins. Thea's javelin could penetrate the rock. What did this mean? This showed that the remaining force was not exhausted. If there was no rock, maybe it could fly a few hundred meters. Everyone looked at Thea as if they were looking at a monster. Is this a human? Are all the people outside so terrible? It turned out that the Father did not let us go out to protect the human race, but to protect us. At this time, Hippolyte spoke. Priests, can you announce the result of the first round of the competition? The queen was far from being as pious as she appeared to be. Zeus, the king of the gods, was her man. Who would worship their own man? Not to mention a man who had an affair. Distance creates beauty and faith. She treated the king of gods like this, and her attitude towards the other gods was almost equal. Therefore, when Thea first came, the oracle had an impact on her, but it was not big. At that time, she did not care about the face of the priests of the temple and directly interpreted the oracle, which was the fuse of today's incident. The priests hoped to reduce Thea's right to speak by attacking her. As long as they defeated Thea, they could say that Hippolyte's interpretation of the oracle was wrong, and they could regain some of their right to speak. Unfortunately, now it was all destroyed by Miss Thea. The old priest reluctantly announced, the first game is the distinguished guest from outside, Miss Thea Quinn wins. After that, he pretended to hold Thea's hand to show goodwill. Ha! These guys kept talking about outsiders and outsiders. Originally, this was an indisputable fact. Thea was not crying and shouting to join them, but their words reminded the people around them that Thea was not one of them. Now that they let an outsider win, where was their sense of honor and shame? Everyone thought, that's right, we have to surpass her. All of a sudden, even if there were people who wanted to be friendly with Thea, they did not dare to get close. If they did not get close to her, she was still one of them, but if they got close to her, they would be regarded as a traitor. They had indirectly isolated Thea. At this time, the dark and strong woman finally realized something. Her face became extremely ugly, and a few traces of red appeared on her dark face. Just when Thea was ready to see her vomit blood, the dark and strong woman clenched her teeth and held back the blood with her stone-like body. She looked at Thea, who was like a little white flower, with some fear. She regretted it at this time. If she had known that the opponent's strength was so terrifying, she would not have come to challenge her. Strength was the foundation of all fighting. In the past, the dark and strong woman relied on her brute strength to defeat countless opponents. Now the tables had turned, and it was time for her to experience that helplessness. With a heavy heart, she did not greet anyone and left alone in disappointment. At this time, Thea was also ready to retreat and rest. The priests must have rushed back to think of countermeasures. Anyway, she had won the first game and had taken the initiative. Even if she lost the next game, she still had room to maneuver. Besides, she did not care too much about winning or losing. Seeing that she was leaving, Diana quickly pulled her back. Are you interested in watching me and Antiope train? Her little face was full of excitement as she spoke. This was probably the only time she felt comfortable on the island. Her little aunt was really good to her. Anyway, Thea had nothing to do, so she just thought of it as killing time. She nodded and followed Diana to a remote martial arts field. Chapter 195. Antiope had left the arena much earlier than them and was now wielding her spear alone. She did not look surprised when she saw Thea following Diana. Diana must have told her beforehand. "Miss Thea, come and train with us." Antiope was very straightforward. Her words were resolute and impactful. "I'm just here to take a look." Thea looked at the dagger thrown to her in confusion. She wanted to refuse, but Antiope did not even give her a chance to speak. In fact, Thea did not dislike Antiope. Her straightforwardness reminded her of Lady Shiva in the past. Both of them were very pure people, much more to her liking than Diana's mother and those crafty priestesses. "All right then. How do we start?" Thea waved her sword. Their swords were shorter than the one-handed swords in the outside world, but they were heavier. Thea was now walking on a non-human path. If it were a normal person, they would definitely feel uncomfortable. Antiope, who was straightforward, made an unexpected suggestion. "A three-person free-for-all. Come on." Diana already looked like a future. She took a weapon from the rack. Of course, it was not a divine artifact. With a shield in her left hand and a sword in her right, she slowly approached the battle circle. Antiope continued to wield her spear. She stared at Thea and Diana's footsteps like an eagle, constantly paying attention to their footsteps and body movements. Seeing that they were very disciplined and had no intention of attacking first, Thea could only dance with her dagger. "Then I'll go first." She slashed her dagger at Antiope's neck. "You're very fast." Antiope used her spear to block the slash and praised casually. At the same time, she leaned to the side to avoid Diana, who was charging at her. Since it was a three-person free-for-all, Thea could not just attack one person. After her dagger was blocked, she took the opportunity to stab at Diana, who was running towards her. The latter blocked her attack with her shield. Thea kicked at Diana's lower abdomen and twisted her head to avoid Antiope's spear. The three of them had their own strengths. Antiope was the oldest, and her martial arts were almost perfect. Diana completely relied on her innate combat instincts to make up for her lack of experience. Thea stood on the shoulders of the humans who had accumulated thousands of years of fighting experience. Antiope represented the depth of martial arts, Diana the purity of martial arts, and Thea represented the breadth of martial arts. The three of them fought for 10 minutes to understand each other's level. In fact, it was mainly Diana and her aunt who had deepened their impression of Thea. No matter how they changed their moves, they were easily defeated and counterattacked. If it was not for the three-person free-for-all, either of them would have been defeated if they fought alone. The accumulation of thousands of years of human knowledge was not a joke. It was not that there were no people who could defeat the accumulation of knowledge of an entire society with their own strength, but they were definitely not the two of them. The situation gradually turned into a 2-on-1 between Diana and Antiope. This time, Thea was a little overwhelmed. On the one hand, she was not used to using her weapon. On the other hand, her strength was also suppressed by Diana, so she was a little frustrated. Antiope saw that she was in a disadvantageous situation and quickly stopped attacking. She stood alone and left the battlefield to them. With one less person, Thea's strength was immediately displayed. Many of her moves were bold and unrestrained, but they were extremely lethal. She slashed left and right, and at this time, she was still unbelievably immature Wonder Woman. She would occasionally counterattack, but most of the time, she was using her shield to block. Thea was sweating. This girl had the potential to be an MT. Her shield was really good. The parry, block, and dodge values were almost full. In a short period of time, she used 7 sets of swordsmanship, from Kashima Shindo Ryu to Iran's assassination technique. She used all the best moves from ancient times to modern times, but she still could not defeat Diana, who was stubbornly defending. "Okay, I'm done." Thea panted and threw away the dagger that was chipped. If she continued fighting, she would enter a tiring phase. It was meaningless. Besides, she did not eat breakfast. Although she was not hungry, her stomach was empty and uncomfortable. Diana excitedly took the shield and looked at it. There were countless scratches on it. The best way to repair this shield was to melt it down. "Your moves are really good. Did you come up with them yourself?" "How could I come up with them? They were accumulated over thousands of years by humans." No matter how thick-skinned Thea was, she could not say that she came up with them herself. Why is it not written in the books? Thea was a little embarrassed. How could these things be written in the books? It would destroy the stability of society. But this was not easy to explain. If she said so, Diana would definitely ask more questions. Then the three entered the daily teaching phase. It was mainly Antiope who taught Diana, and Thea watched from the side. But after watching for a while, she realized that something was wrong. The basic beliefs of the two were different. Antiope advocated offense, but Diana was good at defense. Maybe the idea of protecting in her heart was too deep, and there was always a sense of lack of aggressiveness. The two's teaching was stumbling. After a long morning, they finally said goodbye to Antiope, who was disappointed in them. Diana dragged Thea to eat. Ouch! Thea looked at the batter-like thing that was served and felt a little disgusted. You're eating this? Yeah, we've been eating this for so many years. It's full, nutritious, and tastes good. Thea took a spoon and stirred it twice. It was disgusting no matter how she looked at it. It was a little too much to call it pig's food, but dark cuisine was considered a delicacy compared to this. She whispered to Diana, "When we leave the island, I'll treat you to a good meal." Diana was shocked. She looked around and saw that no one was paying attention to her. She whispered, "My mother won't let me go out." What are you afraid of? Forget it, you're right. Thea wanted to just kidnap her and take her out. She started the skateboard and flew out in a minute. But after thinking about it, Diana only had the silver bracelet of protection on her now. It was indeed a little dangerous. Her epic equipment had been stolen by her mother. Unless it was absolutely necessary, she would not give it to her. It was better to wait for Steve Trevor to bring the Germans to wipe them out. Thea swallowed her original plan. She lowered her head and drank 2 mouthfuls of the batter. Bah! It's too disgusting. No wonder Steve had to leave after 2 days. It was purely because of this disgusting food that he was forced to leave. Thea was so angry that she instantly opened the Eye of Horus. She scanned the entire cafeteria and found that everyone was eating the same thing. No one was giving her a hard time. She could still hold on if the time was short. There was still nearly half a year left. Forget it, I'll just bite the bullet and eat. God's eye? You really are the son of God. Diana was closer this time. Unlike the mess in the square, she could immediately tell that this was definitely a sign of divine power scanning. She looked at Thea angrily. Why didn't you tell the truth? Was it because you were discriminated against that you didn't dare to say it? Chapter 196. What did you say? Thea's heart skipped a beat. She did it out of habit and did not notice that there was a living person beside her. Moreover, she was the kind of person who could sense the divine power. She regretted it. Who are your parents? Diana stared at Sia's face and asked seriously, "Look, I even told you that I'm the illegitimate child of Zeus, and you still refuse to tell me. You're not a good friend." However, Thea really could not say it. The biggest taboo in time travel was to say the names of one's parents. If she said Malcolm's name now, maybe one day in 70 years, Diana would see Old Ma on the road and think of Thea. She would go up to Old Ma and talk to him. With her personality, she would definitely do it. Old Ma was strongly stimulated. Perhaps he was originally going to find Moira to communicate with her, but because of the interference, he did not manage to do so. The little life that was born because of their communication that day was ruined, and Miss Sia might not be able to give birth. What the F***ck is this? Therefore, Thea only introduced her real name. Her real name did not matter. If there was a real name, it meant that the baby had been born. If there was no such name, it meant that the baby had not been born yet. Besides, there were many people with the same name in Europe and America. However, she could not say a word about her family. She waved her hand and said, "Diana, I really can't say. I'm sorry." Is it a god that has already fallen? Will it be sensed when the name is mentioned? Diana touched her chin and forced herself to imagine. She seemed to realize that Thea had her reasons. She also got the answer to the great strength that Thea showed when she threw the javelin. It was most likely a divine power that she did not understand. Seeing that Thea finally stopped thinking about this problem, Thea finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Hey, do you have a kitchen here?" She was very doubtful about whether she could hold on until Steve Trevor came. She could endure it for a short time, but she still had nearly half a year to go. What if she starved to death before the old man came?
Her idea was very simple. There were no guns or cannons. She could make her own. She could at least take some kitchen utensils and make it herself. Diana was stunned by her wild thoughts. On Paradise Island, fighting was an honor, and labor was a disgrace. It was very shameful to give up swords and pick up cooking utensils. Being discriminated against and being looked down upon was a common occurrence. Fortunately, Diana was an open-minded person. She knew that their food was not suited to the tastes of the outside world, so it was understandable that Thea wanted to make some for herself. He said that he would take note of this matter and report it to the queen at night.
Heh! Thea gritted her teeth. Your queen even cares about cooking utensils?
It was true that she was the village chief. Diana was even more so. The drug that could poison her had not been developed yet. They found a clean robe and spread it on the ground. The whole pig was placed on it. Thea and Diana each took a short sword to cut the meat. Although there was no sweet and sour seasoning, the taste was very good after being hungry for a day. Thea felt that this pig was better than the Star City chef. Diana was a little excited. God took pity on her. She had lived for 5,000 years, and this was the first time that a whole pig fell in front of her for her to eat. She was a demigod. Staying on this island for so many years was not a small burden on her body. Plus, she ate batter every day. She might not even know what it was like to be full. Now, seeing Thea's mouth full of oil, Diana no longer hesitated in her heart. She took the short sword and cut a piece of golden pork. She grabbed it with one hand and put it into her mouth. While eating, she almost cried. It was too delicious. When they finished 1/3 of the pig, Diana's reason finally came back. We should pray to the moon goddess first. It doesn't feel good to eat it quietly. Thea wiped the oil stains on her mouth and looked at Diana, who was a little guilty. This girl was too stubborn. She even felt guilty eating a pig. She could only comfort her. Don't worry. She is the night hunting goddess. Catching a pig in the middle of the night is definitely a tribute to her. She can't be more happy.
Really?
Diana was a little confused. This explanation was not wrong, but she still felt that something was wrong. Just when she was thinking, a slight but clear low laughter came from the forest. Ha ha! The sound was as clear as a silver bell, and it was particularly obvious in the dark night. Who is it? The two girls were very sensitive. They each took up their weapons and guarded against the direction where the enemy might appear.
Chapter 197.
There was silence all around. The two looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. The sound just now was definitely not an illusion. Thea opened the Eye of Horus again, and found that there were only the two of them and the half-eaten pig within a radius of 500 meters.
It couldn't be the pig that made the laughter, right? It was a little scary. She poked the pig with her sword, but there was no reaction. Thea finally confirmed that there was nothing special about the pig except for its fresh and delicious meat. Who made the sound? The two thought for a while but had no clue. Thea was not afraid. She had killed a god, so why would she be afraid of ghosts? The word fear was not in Diana's dictionary. The two continued to sit on the ground and eat calmly. When Hippolyte and her entourage brought the kitchen utensils and rice noodles to them, they saw this scene. The two sat on the ground, and a suspected pig-shaped creature had been eaten by them until only a little bit was left. However, the smell of meat drifted out for half a mile, and the two entourage of the queen couldn't help but swallow their saliva. The smell was refreshing enough, let alone eating it. What are you doing? The queen asked with a smile.
The good girl Diana was embarrassed and couldn't answer. Thea, who could lie like drinking water, replied casually, "For the venerable moon goddess, we are offering a sacrifice." Thea could see that as long as it was against the temple, the queen would support it. If Thea wanted to burn the temple at this time, the queen might even keep watch for her. The queen glanced at the oil stains on their mouths indifferently and said lightly, "God should be respected in the heart, not on the surface. Well, I have given you the things. You should finish the sacrifice early and have a good rest." After that, the queen asked the female warrior to put down the rice noodles and pots and turned away. "You see, your mother also thinks that we are offering a proper sacrifice. Now she is relieved," Thea said to Diana jokingly. Diana is completely confused, but what her mother just said is still in her ears. She has always believed in Hippolyte's words since she was a child.
She looks down at the residue on the ground.
Is this really the right way to sacrifice?
Thea didn't think too much about it. She cleaned up the place, took Diana to take a shower, and went to bed early. The next day, early in the morning, Diana went to do her daily training and eat breakfast. Thea had completely given up on their meals, so she decided to do it herself. She jumped on the skateboard and prepared to go out to see if there were any other wild animals. Flying over the coast, he unexpectedly found a person training alone. It was none other than Thea's opponent, the tanned and strong woman. At this time, the tanned and strong woman was running with a giant log on her back. The top of her head was like a steamer, with steam coming out of it. Her body was covered in sweat, and her mouth was constantly cheering for herself.
What a fierce woman.
Thea has never trained so hard even when she was at her most hardworking. No wonder her body was out of shape. This kind of training is like jumping 1,000 times. If she can't do it, she will run 10 kilometers with weights. If she can't run 10 kilometers, she will jump rope 800 times. She can't stand it. It's too much of a test of perseverance. Thea is impressed that someone else can do what she can't do. She didn't disturb her and flew away. At the same time, she was thinking, is the second round a test of endurance? Then I might as well just admit defeat. She didn't want to run around the island like the tanned and strong woman. She didn't know if she was lucky or not, but she was targeted by 2 eagles. Just as she was thinking about how to shoot the eagles, the 2 eagles rushed at her like crazy. She twisted their necks and carried them back to the place where she lived. Is it because of the fall of Horus that all the eagles are hostile to me? But that's a matter of the future. How did the eagles in 1918 know? She couldn't figure it out, so she didn't think about it anymore. She skinned the eagles and roasted them over the fire. She sprinkled some salt that the queen sent. The taste was not good, and the meat was a little dry. It was like heaven and earth compared to pork. After breakfast, Thea began to get busy for her future rations. Compared to Gideon's sci-fi spaceship, this is a primitive society. She wanted to eat buns, but she didn't know how to make dough.
Unfortunately, there is no Baidu in this era.
Fortunately, the study Hippolyte prepared for Diana had a lot of miscellaneous books. She flipped through the books and roughly understood the process. When Diana rushed to her, Thea was kneading dough with her face full of flour.
The second round now?
What are you talking about? Come with me. It's impossible to leave quickly. Thea's face is full of flour. This is the competition for the name of the goddess of hunt, not the competition for the god of cookery. Diana could only watch her wash her face and change clothes. She looked around and saw that there were no mistakes. She took her to the dense forest on the east side of the island. What are we doing here? Thea was very familiar with this place. She got her wild boar here, and many of her mushrooms were also picked here. Because they took some time to change clothes and wash their faces, when they arrived at the scene, all the people on the island were waiting for her. The 3 priests were very serious this time. No one pretended to be a grandson to her.
They all stared at her fiercely. The leader of the priests cleared her throat.
The goddess of hunt needs the best hunters. Your task this time is very simple. Enter the dense forest and win by the number of prey you catch. After that, she seemed to kindly remind Thea, Miss Thea, you can shoot arrows, right? This was the idea that they came up with after much thought. They wanted to play to their strengths and avoid their weaknesses. Don't you have great strength? Let's change the competition to skills. Although the dark and strong women were not good at archery, they had lived on the island for 5,000 years. These abilities were almost instinctive, so they felt that they had a good chance of winning. Can you shoot arrows? Diana also asked in a low voice. There was no other way. Thea had lost her bow and arrow. These days, she had been hunting with javelins. No one had seen her shoot arrows. Okay, but you have to lend me your bow and arrow, Thea said modestly, but the villain in her heart was roaring. What a joke. We are going to become an archery family. There are black arrows, green arrows, and red arrows. How dare you ask me if I can shoot arrows? Her vague words coupled with the act of borrowing the bow and arrow made several priests show a knowing smile. This time, they could finally equalize a point. She could not shoot arrows, so naturally, she would not carry a bow and arrow at ordinary times, which was very reasonable. Worried, Diana handed her bow and arrow to her and told her to be careful. Thea took the bow and tried it. Unlike the modern composite bow she was used to,
Diana and the others used a very old horn bow, which required high arm strength, but accuracy required more experience and eyesight. Fortunately, she was not short of arm strength or eyesight experience. She learned that there was no arrow limit, but there was a time limit until the sun went down. She took 2 pots of arrows and found a direction with a dark and strong woman. She took 3 female warriors who were said to be assisting but actually monitoring into the dense forest. Chapter 198. Thea didn't talk to the people behind her, and they didn't have the intention to communicate with each other. Both sides treated each other as if they didn't exist. The 3 female warriors who assisted in the surveillance were watching her from a distance of more than 10 meters. This forest is really dense. Thea sighed after walking for more than 10 minutes. She didn't feel it when she was riding a skateboard. Walking in such deep and shallow places was really not enjoyable. Affected by the forbidden area on the island, she couldn't use her earth-shattering magical power, but she still had her powerful psychic power. She condensed her psychic power into a line and explored in all directions. She received a lot of feedback. There were some small animals hidden in the bushes and piles of fallen leaves in the tree hole. She could totally learn from Alpha Centauri and not eat or drink all day long and kill 318 rabbits as trophies. But it would be a very ugly scene. The goddess of the hunt was hanging on to her last breath. If she saw how cruel she was to the small animals, would she die with a bang? The title of God Slayer was enough. Killing 2 gods wouldn't upgrade the title. Thea decided to follow the orthodox hunting method to avoid angering the goddess. She identified the direction and ran towards the place where she caught the wild boar yesterday. Wild boar had the word pig in its name, but it was actually quite fierce. No one in the Foot Basin country had ever seen a tiger or a lion. They thought that the bravest animal in the world was the wild boar, so they often crowned the warriors with the title of pig warrior. If you didn't know the truth, you would think that he was scolding you. In fact, it was really a compliment. Thea was looking for the wild boar at this time. She was in a hurry yesterday and didn't see it clearly. She only remembered that there were a few of them. It was completely worthy of the goddess to treat this thing as prey. She just wanted to show respect to the goddess. There was no need to hunt animals that sounded fierce. What's more, the prey was hers. She could eat it after the competition. Compared to the problem of how to eat a tiger or a lion, the wild boar was the most suitable. If the 2 of them couldn't eat it, it would be a favor to give it to the queen and Antiope. The 3 female warriors following Thea didn't know why she ignored the small animals nearby. Seeing her walking quickly through the forest, they didn't ask her anything and quickly followed her. Relying on her keen psychic power, Thea found the crime scene 15 minutes after entering the forest. She could vaguely see the bloodstains left behind when she committed the crime. At that time, she descended from the heavens and stabbed the wild boar with a javelin. After that, she cruelly dragged the wild boar away. The traces of the crime scene were too obvious. Where did those pigs go? Thea carefully looked at the traces on the ground. After looking at it for a long time, she could only helplessly express that the scene was too messy and full of pig footprints. Moreover, she did not have the talent of a scout. In her eyes, it was really difficult to find the whereabouts of the pigs in such a messy scene. Just as he was about to turn around and fight other animals, he found several large animals running towards him under the scan of his spiritual power. When she took a closer look, weren't they the pig sisters she had been searching for? It couldn't be helped. There were no males on Paradise Island. The one they ate yesterday was a little sow. Of course, the pig sisters were not here to reunite with her. Her brutal methods yesterday had caught them off guard. Today, a few wild boars were immersed in the grief of losing their loved ones. Unexpectedly, they saw her in her iconic red dress nearby and charged towards her without caring about their stamina. "Stay away from them," Thea shouted at the few Amazons. As for whether they listened to her or not, it was none of her business. She looked at the surrounding terrain and found a boulder more than 3 meters above the ground. Using the huge grip of the mechanical arm, she climbed up quickly and drew her bow, ready to deal with the first wave of the wild boar's charge. When the first wild boar rushed out of the forest, it was greeted by an arrow as fast as lightning. Unfortunately, Sia had never used this kind of ancient bow before. She pulled the bowstring a little too hard, and the arrow that was originally aimed at the wild boar's eye brushed past its mouth, bringing a large piece of flesh and blood with it, and flew far away. She's really strong, and her archery skills are not bad. A few Amazons hid in the trees and watched from afar. Thea's arrow was almost drawn to the maximum tension of the bow. The angle was not very good, but it still left a bloody mark on the thick skin of the wild boar. It fully showed that the strength and speed of the arrow had reached the extreme of this kind of ancient bow. They thought it was good, but Thea felt that it was too embarrassing. She missed such a big target, partly because of the bow, and partly because she did not practice. For the second arrow, she did not blindly pursue speed. She spread out her spiritual power and corrected the arrow's trajectory. She pulled out another arrow, looked at the wild boar's bell-like eyes from afar, and released the bowstring. Bang! The wild boar was shot and fell on the spot. Blood flowed out of its eye sockets like it was worthless. Its limbs trembled violently. Although it was tenacious, it was only a matter of time before it died. Beautiful! A few female warriors could not understand Thea. Considering that she pretended to be weak when she threw the javelin, they could not figure out whether she was originally good at archery or had a breakthrough on the spot. From a pure warrior's point of view, her arrow was almost perfect. Even if Antiope, the best archer in the tribe, personally shot it, he would not be able to do it. There were a total of 3 wild boars that rushed out. This pig was obviously stronger than the other 2. Thea could not tell whether it was the mother or the sister pig. She only knew that the remaining 2 small ones seemed to taste better. Anyway, they could resurrect infinitely. She continued to aim at another wild boar without feeling guilty. This wild boar also fell under her sinful arrow without any suspense. The remaining piglets screamed and turned around to run. Still want to run. Thea jumped down from the boulder and chased after them like a galloping horse. In order to avoid capsizing, she always kept a distance of 100 meters and followed them at a leisurely pace. This pig was a little abnormal. Thea found that it was not running in a panic. It was running in an orderly and purposeful way. Is it trying to lure me into an ambush? Do wild boars have such intelligence? But thinking that they had lived for thousands of years, it seemed that anything abnormal could happen. Thea's expression gradually became serious. She slowed down a little and scanned the area with her psychic power to the maximum. If the god slayer was ambushed by a group of wild boars, then Horus's death would be too unjust. Her caution soon paid off. 600 meters to the east, there were several large animals. The little wild boar leading the way in front of her was also heading there. Hee. Thea smiled mysteriously, revealing 8 teeth. Her strengthened eyes had already seen a thick figure not far away. She wondered if there was an ice house on Paradise Island. It would be a pity to waste so much pork. Chapter 199. This time, there was no boulder for her to look down on, but she was already familiar with the performance of the horn bow. Instead of dodging immediately, she began to shoot arrows from a distance with all her might. She did not stop shooting arrows one after another. Every time, the bow was almost fully drawn. She did not use her eyes to aim, but used her mental power to accurately position the arrow. When several female Amazon warriors arrived at the scene, they saw such an inhuman scene. She shot a rain of arrows from a distance of 300 meters. Nearly 40 arrows were shot out by her in less than a minute. The hit rate was as high as 90%, or even a little higher. The 5 wild boars, including the first little pig, were all pierced with arrows. Some had 7 or 8 arrows, and some had 5 or 6 arrows. 2 of them were shot to death on the spot, and the remaining few were barely breathing. It was only a matter of time before they died. Thea waved at them from a distance, as if she was asking for draft paper in an exam. Hey! I've run out of arrows. Can you give me some? The few of them looked at each other in dismay. You shot too fast. In the past, they pursued a fatal shot, and 2 quivers of arrows were more than enough. However, looking at Thea's impressive record, they could not say that her arrow rain was nonsense. The female warriors were very upright, and the level of their skills was obvious at a glance. At least they had lived for so many years and had never heard of anyone doing this. They still felt sincere admiration for others who could do what they could not do. They each had arrows with them, but there were not many. The 3 of them pooled together and gave her another quiver. Thea continued to shoot arrows at the wild boars that were not dead. According to the rules of the Amazons, the death of the prey was considered a result, and they could not let the female warriors help. They could only shoot arrows one by one into the fatal parts of the dying wild boars. Soon, the remaining few pigs were shot to death. It should be about time, right? Sia felt that 8 wild boars were enough.
The dark and strong woman might fight for the last second, but she was not so eager to win. Going too far was as bad as falling short. For this meaningless battle, she was too lazy to play. She just wanted to find a way to go back to her original time and space. If she could not go home, not to mention the name of Artemis, even if you gave her the name of Zeus, it would be useless. Pack up and go out. She turned to the female warrior who was tying the dead boars with ropes. Miss Thea, it's only been less than an hour?
One of the female warriors tried to explain to her how sacred and noble it was, but she swallowed the words on the tip of her tongue when she saw her resolute expression.
They sped up their movements. It was almost impossible for the four of them to transport 8 pigs out. Fortunately, they had Thea, who was suspected to be the reincarnation of Hercules, to help them. Using 2 strands of rope to tie the pigs together, they could still pull them out by force. The 3 of them each carried one while Thea pulled the long string by herself. As they were slowly walking out, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her back. Someone launched a sneak attack?
She immediately thought that the 3 female warriors were going to use underhanded means, but in the next moment, she judged that it was not the case.
The danger came from the sky. He threw the rope away and rolled sideways on the spot, dodging the fierce attack from the sky. Thea was a little shaken when she saw who the enemy was. Damn! Why is it another eagle? She couldn't tell what species the creature that had ambushed her was, but it wasn't small at all. It was dark gray all over, 1 meter long, with a wingspan of 3 meters. It had a sharp hook-shaped beak. After missing its attack, it returned to the sky and stared at Sia with its 2 fierce eyes. Thea felt that her reputation with the eagle tribe had solidified into hatred. Why was every eagle looking at her as if she was an enemy? This was too illogical. Your boss can still live for more than 200 years. What method did you use to determine the murderer of the god slayer so early? The eagle could not hear her complaints. It turned around gracefully in the air and cried out loudly. Its hoarse and high-pitched voice spread far and wide. In less than 30 seconds, it was as if the forest had come alive, and birds of prey kept converging in this place. Thea kept shooting from below, but the eagle was extremely agile. It dodged left and right. Even with Thea's excellent archery skills, it took her a total of 5 arrows to shoot it down. It was too late. Thea looked at the black shadows that appeared in the distance and used the eye of Horus to observe them. There were a total of 17 birds of different sizes and colors. They were obviously not of the same species. She didn't know if these eagles were stimulated by her divine eyes or because the first eagle had been shot down, but their speed suddenly increased by a large margin. How unlucky! Thea quickly put the quiver on her back. The arrows used to kill the wild boar had been retrieved. The Amazon's iron smelting skills were good, so the arrows could be used again. It was just that the tail feathers had dropped a lot, which affected the shooting accuracy. She activated her spiritual power and the eye of Horus, and the mechanical arm in her left hand was almost at full power. She drew the bow fully and aimed at a bird of prey with a white head and iron claws that was about to enter her shooting range. Ha! Is this a bald eagle? Thea was a little dumbfounded. Is this an American bird? This is the national bird of the United States of America. It was full of free democratic will. You have a Mediterranean climate here. How did this American bird fly here? Thea did not have time to complain. She shot down the national bird that represented the spirit of freedom and democracy without any guilt. She then drew the bow again and aimed at the second bird. As she continued to draw her bow and arrow, she shot down 6 different birds of prey. The female warriors had already hidden themselves. Many of these birds had not been seen in the past 5,000 years. God knows which rock crevice they had jumped out from. Their mission was very simple, which was to continue to watch until one side was completely wiped out by the other. Thea had no time to calmly shoot arrows at this time. The speed of the eagles was too fast. Compared to them, the wild boars were as slow as turtles. She constantly used trees and other obstacles to avoid the enemy's attacks. One of them was too close to her, and she punched its head with her mechanical arm at full power. Damn it, if she had known that he would be so savage, she would have brought a knife. That punch was indeed very powerful, but as someone who was slightly obsessed with cleanliness, she still felt very uncomfortable. Half of her body was splashed with blood, and some white and yellow things were splashed on her body, making her feel extremely disgusted. But although she was disgusted, she had not reached the point where she could not walk after seeing blood. She constantly looked for the gap after the eagles attacked and before they took to the air. If they were far away, she would use the bow and arrow. If they were close, she would directly smash them. When the birds of prey reorganized in the air, they found that there were only 6 of them left. They looked at each other. 2 of them were slightly hesitant, while the other 4 were very smart and arranged a progressive charge. You and I, one after another. This tactic really gave Thea a headache, but she was not stupid. She used the gap between dodging to pick up a few goose egg-sized stones on the ground. Every time an eagle swooped down, she would throw the stones without